The nursery keys sounded like a verdict when Beatrice Lydgate laid them on the silver tray. The little ring of iron and brass struck the polished surface with a cold, delicate chime that travelled through the entrance hall of Harrow-mere Park as clearly as a church bell. No one moved. Not the footmen in their dark livery, not the upstairs maid with her eyes fixed upon the marble floor, not Mistress Pike, the housekeeper, who stood as stiff as a carved post near the staircase. Even the fire seemed to draw itself lower in the great hearth, as if the house itself understood that something unjust had just been made official. Yorkshire rain tapped softly against the tall windows, silvering the afternoon of October 1862. But inside the Duke of Harrow-mere's ancestral seat, the air was dry with judgment. Miss Beatrice Lydgate kept her gloved hands folded before her. The gloves were mended at the fingertips, so carefully that only a woman who had mended them by candlelight would have known where the stitches lay. Her travelling bonnet waited on the table behind her. Her small trunk had already been brought down by a footman who would not meet her eyes. She had been governess at Harrow-mere Park for 18 months. She had taught Lady Imogen Vale to read without fear of difficult words. She had taught Master Percy Vale to count by lining up chestnuts along the nursery rug. She had sung to both children after nightmares. She had gone without a proper shawl, so they might have warmer blankets when the east wind crept under the nursery door. Yet now she stood accused of locking a frightened child inside the Blue Nursery, and all she had left to return was a ring of keys. There, Lady Honoria Vane said, with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who preferred cruelty dressed as order. That was not so difficult, was it, Miss Lydgate? Beatrice lifted her gaze. Lady Honoria stood beneath the portrait of some long-dead Westcombe duchess, her black silk gown severe, her silver hair arranged without a single loosened strand. She was not mistress of Harrow-mere Park by title. The Duke was master here. Yet in his long absences, Lady Honoria had learned to move through the house as if every corridor, every servant, every child's breath belonged to her keeping. "No, my lady," Beatrice said. Her voice did not break. That seemed to disappoint several people. Lady Honoria's eyes narrowed by the smallest measure. "You understand, I hope, that sentiment cannot excuse disobedience. A nursery must be governed by discipline. Children must be protected from unsuitable influence." Beatrice felt the words settle upon her, like dust thrown over clean linen. Unsuitable influence. That was the phrase Lady Honoria had chosen, after Lady Imogen was found sobbing behind the locked door of the Blue Nursery 2 nights before. It sounded better than accusation. It sounded almost merciful. It did not say that Beatrice had been blamed before she had been allowed to speak. It did not say that she had found the door already locked, or that the nursery bell rope had hung cut and useless against the wall. It did not say that Imogen had clung to her afterward with both hands and whispered, over and over, that she had not been naughty. Beatrice looked down at the keys. There was the schoolroom cupboard key, with its dull square head, the linen press key, worn smooth from years of use, the nursery hearth guard key, the tiny key to the locked drawer where slates, ribbons, and prizes were kept. At the bottom of the ring hung a little brass acorn tag, rubbed bright where her thumb had touched it every morning. It had once made Percy laugh. He had called it the oak tree baby. The memory pierced more sharply than the accusation. "If there is nothing further," Lady Honoria continued, "the carriage will take you as far as York. From there, I am sure a woman of your education can make arrangements. A woman of your education. Not a gentlewoman, not a protector of children, not a person whose life might be broken by a whisper in the wrong drawing-room." Beatrice drew one slow breath. She had learned, long ago, that poverty made grief inconvenient to other people. Her father had been a clergyman with more books than savings. Her mother had died with apologies on her lips because there had been no dowry, no aunt with a London house, no brother able to shield a daughter from the necessity of earning bread among people who both needed and disdained her. Beatrice had learned to be useful. Useful women were tolerated. Useful women were thanked in private and dismissed in public. But she had not learned to confess to a lie. "I will go when His Grace commands it," she said. The hall altered. It was not sound exactly. It was the tightening that passes through a room when someone of lower standing refuses the shape prepared for her. Mistress Pike's mouth pinched. One footman glanced quickly toward Lady Honoria, then down again. "His Grace," Lady Honoria said, "has entrusted domestic order to me. Then my dismissal may wait until he confirms it." Beatrice kept her hands still, though her pulse beat hard beneath the mended seams of her gloves. "I cannot keep the keys when truth has been locked away from me. But I will not leave as though silence were proof." Lady Honoria's face remained composed. Only the lace at her throat stirred with her breath. "You forget yourself." "No, my lady," Beatrice's voice softened, and somehow that made the answer firmer. "I believe I have remembered myself at last." A small sound came from the staircase above. Beatrice looked up before anyone else did. Half hidden behind the carved banister stood Lady Imogen Vale, 8 years old, white-faced in her mourning grey frock. Her dark hair had slipped from its ribbon, and one hand clutched the rail, as if the polished wood were the edge of a cliff. Behind her, smaller and rounder, Master Percy peered through the spindles with both eyes wide. Beatrice's heart moved toward them so swiftly that her body nearly followed. She stopped herself. If she reached for them now, Lady Honoria would call it manipulation. If Imogen ran to her, the child would pay for it later in some quiet, proper way that left no bruise for anyone to see. So Beatrice gave the children only the smallest shake of her head. "Do not come down, do not speak." Imogen's lips trembled. Percy pressed one fist to his mouth. Lady Honoria turned. Her voice became honey over steel. "Imogen, Percy, return to the nursery at once." Imogen flinched. Beatrice saw it. Mistress Pike saw it. The nearest footman saw it, and pretended not to. "Now," Lady Honoria said. The children vanished from the stairs like candles pinched out. Beatrice closed her eyes for one brief moment. That was the worst of it. Not the lost position. Not the trunk waiting by the door. Not the knowledge that one poisonous reference could follow her into every respectable house in England. The worst was leaving 2 children in a place where fear had learned to walk softly. Lady Honoria turned back, satisfied that obedience had been restored. "You see, Miss Lydgate, this is precisely what I mean. Your influence has made them emotional." Beatrice opened her eyes. "They are children, my lady, not furniture." A maid sucked in a breath. Lady Honoria went very still. "You will apologize." Beatrice knew what that command meant. Not merely apology. Surrender. A bending of the neck before the household. A final lesson to every servant, watching that truth mattered less than rank, when rank had chosen its story. She looked again at the keys. The brass acorn caught a low flame from the hearth. For one heartbeat, she imagined taking them back. Not for herself, for Imogen, for Percy. For every morning when 2 small faces looked up because she entered the room and made it feel safer. But keys were authority only when the house allowed them to open doors. In her hand, now, they would be a mockery. "I cannot apologize for a locked door I did not lock," she said. The words were quiet. They struck hard. Lady Honoria's expression cooled into something almost peaceful. "Then you are dismissed without character." The sentence moved through the hall, like a blade wrapped in velvet. Without character. Beatrice felt the blood leave her fingers. A governess dismissed without character was not merely unemployed, she was marked. Every future mistress would wonder what had gone unspoken. Every agency would hesitate. Every respectable threshold would narrow before her. For the first time that afternoon, her composure nearly failed, not because she was guilty, because innocence was such a fragile thing when held by powerless hands. Then the front doors opened. Rain-cooled air swept into the hall. A groom stepped back quickly. A footman straightened as if pulled by wire. Lady Honoria turned with irritation already forming, but it died before reaching her mouth. A man stood beneath the arch of the doorway, dark coat beaded with rain, riding gloves in one hand, hat in the other. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and utterly still. His hair was black, his face pale from travel, his eyes the grey of stone under winter water. No one needed to announce him. The house knew him before the servants found their voices. Adrian Westcombe, Duke of Harrow-mere, had come home. Silence fell so completely that Beatrice heard one drop of rain fall from his coat to the marble floor. His gaze moved from Lady Honoria to the waiting trunk, from the trunk to Beatrice's white face, and then to the silver tray between them. He looked at the keys. Something changed in his expression. It was not warmth, it was not pity, it was attention sharp and exact. He stepped forward and the footman bowed as he passed. Lady Honoria recovered first. "Your Grace, we did not expect you until next week." Clearly, his voice was low and controlled. He did not look away from the tray. "What is happening in my hall?" Lady Honoria folded her hands. "A regrettable household matter. Miss Lydgate has been relieved of her position after a grave failure in the nursery." Beatrice felt the Duke's eyes come to her then. She prepared herself for another judgment, another man of rank hearing only the polished version and finding it convenient. But he did not ask Lady Honoria for more. He studied Beatrice as if her silence had weight, as if the fact that she still stood upright mattered. "Miss Lydgate," he said, "did you return these keys willingly?" Beatrice's throat tightened. "I returned them because I cannot keep responsibility without trust, Your Grace." A flicker passed through his eyes. "That was not what I asked." The hall held its breath. Beatrice answered with the truth she could afford. "No, Your Grace." The Duke reached for the ring of keys. His fingers closed around the brass acorn tag, then paused. He separated the keys one by one with a slow metallic whisper. Schoolroom cupboard, linen press, hearth guard, prize drawer. His gaze sharpened. Lady Honoria's face lost a little color. Beatrice saw it and felt through all her fear the first stir of something dangerous. Not hope, not yet, but recognition. The Duke lifted the ring slightly. There should be a fifth nursery key. No one spoke. The rain tapped at the windows. Somewhere above, a child's step creaked and stilled. Adrian Westcombe looked from the tray to Lady Honoria, then to Beatrice. His voice remained quiet, but every person in the hall heard the command beneath it. "Where is the key to the Blue Nursery?" Lady Honoria answered too quickly. "The Blue Nursery has not been in regular use for years, Your Grace. It is entirely possible the key was mislaid before Miss Lydgate ever came into this house." The Duke did not move. The ring of keys hung from his fingers, the little brass acorn catching the firelight with every faint turn. Beatrice watched his face and saw no anger yet. That frightened Lady Honoria more than anger would have done. Men who shouted could be guided toward exhaustion. Men who observed were far more difficult to manage. "Mislaid," he repeated. "A nursery key. In a house where every linen press, coal cupboard and silver drawer is entered in a register." Mistress Pike lowered her eyes. Lady Honoria gave a thin smile. "Domestic records are not always perfect, Adrian. You have been away long enough to know that a great house cannot pause over every small irregularity. Then it will pause now, The words were not loud, but every servant in the hall straightened. He turned to the nearest footman. "Have Miss Lydgate's trunk taken back upstairs, not to the nursery wing, to the east guest room beside Mrs. Alder's chamber. Mrs. Alder will remain with her until I decide otherwise." The footman blinked. "Yes, Your Grace." Lady Honoria's composure tightened. "You cannot mean to house a dismissed governess among family rooms. She is not dismissed." The Duke looked toward Beatrice. "Not by me." Beatrice felt the sentence strike some guarded place within her, and she distrusted the weakness that followed. Relief could make a woman foolish if she mistook delay for rescue. She lowered her chin. "Your Grace, I do not wish to cause disorder in your house. The disorder appears to have preceded you." Lady Honoria's breath sharpened. "This is absurd. A child was found in distress, and Miss Lydgate was responsible for the nursery. That is all." "No," the Duke said. "That is the end of the story you prefer. I require the beginning." He turned toward the staircase. "Take me to the Blue Nursery." For one instant, no one obeyed. Harrow-mere Park had spent years learning Lady Honoria's quiet signals. The small movements of her hand, the tilt of her head, the pauses that told servants when to vanish and when to invent reasons. But the Duke's command belonged to the stones beneath them. Mistress Pike stepped forward as if she had swallowed a pin. "Your Grace, the upper rooms have not been prepared for your inspection. I did not ask whether the door had been dusted." He looked at Beatrice. "Miss Lydgate, you will come." Lady Honoria said, "Adrian, it's not proper to parade her through the house like an injured innocent." Beatrice heard the trap in the phrase, injured innocent. Lady Honoria meant to make the very appearance of fairness seem sentimental. The Duke heard it too. His eyes did not leave Beatrice. "Mrs. Alder will accompany us. The door will remain open wherever possible. That should satisfy propriety." It should not have warmed her. It did. Not because he sounded gentle. He did not. But because he understood the shape of danger in a woman's reputation before she had to explain it. Mrs. Alder, the older sewing maid, who had once smuggled extra wool stockings to the nursery children, hurried forward with a curtsy. Beatrice followed the Duke up the staircase, her bonnet still in her hand, and her heart beating hard enough to blur the edges of the painted ancestors along the landing. Behind them came Lady Honoria, Mistress Pike, Mrs. Alder, and 2 footmen at a careful distance. Above, the house changed. The entrance hall had been polished for visitors and legacy. The nursery corridor carried a different light: chalk dust, lavender soap, cold ashes. The faint sweetness of stored apples from a bowl. Beatrice had kept near the schoolroom window, because Percy liked to count them before luncheon. At the far end stood the Blue Nursery. The door was painted a faded blue so pale, it looked almost grey in the rain-dim light. No child had slept there since the old Duchess's time, yet it remained furnished with a narrow bed, a screen, and a rocking horse, with one painted eye worn dull. 2 nights before, Beatrice had heard Imogen crying behind that door. She had run the length of the corridor, skirts in hand, and found the latch unyielding. She had pulled the bell rope beside the frame and felt it come loose in her hand, cut clean through above the tassel. Then Mistress Pike had appeared, calm as winter, asking what disturbance Miss Lydgate was creating at such an hour. "Open it," the Duke said. Mistress Pike hesitated. "Your Grace, I have no key." Curious. He looked at the closed door, then at the ring in his hand. "Miss Lydgate." Beatrice stepped forward. Every eye followed her. She hated that. She hated more that her fingers trembled when she reached for the latch. "It is not locked now, Your Grace." She pressed down. The latch lifted. The door opened with a soft complaint. Lady Honoria said, "You see, there is no mystery. The child was distressed, and distress often alters memory." The Duke did not answer. He crouched near the latch, heedless of the damp edge of his riding coat, brushing the floorboards. The movement startled Beatrice. Dukes did not usually lower themselves to examine door frames while servants watched. He did. He drew off one glove and touched the wood beside the latch. "These scratches are fresh," Mistress Pike said. "Old wood marks easily, Your Grace. From the outside?" Silence. The Duke ran his thumb along the edge of the door, then held it up. A faint smear of blue clung to his skin. Wax, not paint, not dust. Beatrice saw Lady Honoria's gaze flick toward Mistress Pike and away again. It was the smallest movement, yet the Duke caught it. His face did not change. "Mrs. Alder," he said, "bring the candle closer." The sewing maid obeyed. Flame shivered over the lock plate. There, caught in the narrow groove where key met iron, lay another trace of blue wax. "How interesting," the Duke said. Lady Honoria's voice cooled. "A child may have played with sealing wax at some earlier time, in a disused nursery, inside a lock." He stood. "Miss Lydgate, tell me precisely what happened when you came here that night." Beatrice felt the corridor narrow around her. The servants, Lady Honoria, Mistress Pike. The Duke's grey eyes, direct and unreadable. She had been asked questions before, but only the kind designed to prove an answer already chosen. This was different. That difference made speech harder, not easier. "I was in the schoolroom marking Lady Imogen's copywork," she said. "It was near 8 o'clock. The children had been put to bed. I heard crying from this corridor." "You were alone?" Lady Honoria asked. "Miss Lydgate, do be exact." The Duke did not look at her. "She will answer me." Beatrice breathed once. "I was alone, Your Grace. I came at once. Lady Imogen was behind this door. She was crying and calling for someone to open it. I tried the latch. It would not move. I pulled the bell rope. She looked at the wall. The tassel hung there now, neatly replaced. Too neatly. The rope came away in my hand. The Duke crossed to it. He took the tassel and drew it down. Nothing rang below. He lifted the length, examined the upper portion, and turned it toward the candle. The cut was clean, hidden by a new knot. "Who repaired this?" No one answered. Mistress Pike's face had gone blotched beneath its powder. Lady Honoria said, "Surely one of the maids must have done it without thinking." Without thinking to mention that a nursery bell had been cut on the same night a child was locked inside. His voice remained quiet. That made it worse. Beatrice looked into the room beyond him. The rocking horse stood where it had stood 2 nights before. The blue curtains were drawn back now, but she remembered the darkness pressing against the glass. She remembered Imogen's small voice saying, "I wasn't naughty, Miss Lydgate." "I wasn't." Her hand tightened around her bonnet brim. When the door finally opened, she said, "I did not open it." The Duke turned. "Who did, I do not know." I had gone to fetch another lamp, because Mrs. Pike said the corridor was too dark, and I was alarming the child. When I returned, Lady Imogen was already outside the room. Mistress Pike had her by the shoulders. Mistress Pike burst out. The child was hysterical. Someone had to manage her. "Manage," the Duke said. An unfortunate choice of word. Beatrice saw movement at the far end of the corridor. Imogen stood half-hidden behind the nursery maid, her small face white against the dimness. Percy was there too, clutching the maid's skirt. The Duke saw them, his expression altered, not softening exactly, but losing some of its frost. "Lady Imogen," he said. "You need not come closer." Imogen's eyes went to Beatrice first, then to Lady Honoria. Her whole body seemed to fold inward. Beatrice could not bear it. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "please do not ask her before so many." The Duke looked at her. Something passed between them, brief and unexpected. Not agreement alone, respect. "Very well," Lady Honoria stepped forward. "Imogen, darling, return to your room. Miss Lydgate has upset you enough." Imogen flinched again. The Duke's gaze sharpened. Lady Honoria, remain where you are." The command cracked through the corridor like ice beneath a boot. Imogen stared at him. Then, in a voice so small it almost vanished, she said, "Not Miss Lydgate." No one breathed. Beatrice felt the words enter her chest and hurt there. Lady Honoria smiled too quickly. "The child is confused." Imogen's lips trembled. She looked at the Blue Nursery door, then at the cut bell rope, then at the floor. "She knocked," the child whispered. She kept knocking. Percy pressed both hands over his mouth, as if holding back a secret too large for him. The Duke did not move toward the children. He did not frighten them with urgency. He only inclined his head once. "Thank you." Imogen retreated at once, and the nursery maid led both children away. Lady Honoria's face was pale now, though her voice remained smooth. "A frightened child wishes to please the woman who indulged her. That proves nothing." The Duke looked down at the key ring in his hand. 4 keys and a brass acorn, not 5. Then he looked at the Blue Nursery door, at the wax, at the cut rope, at the scratches outside the latch. Beatrice stood very still. Hope had become dangerous again. If she leaned toward it and it vanished, she did not know how she would remain standing. The Duke seemed to understand that too. He did not offer comfort. He offered something better: action. "Miss Lydgate will not leave Harrow-mere Park," he said. "Her trunk will be taken to the East guest room. Mrs. Alder will attend her. No one will speak to the children about this matter except in my presence or by my express permission." Lady Honoria's eyes flashed. "You risk turning a domestic unpleasantness into a scandal." "No," the Duke said, closing his hand around the keys. "Someone did that when they locked a child in this room." He turned to Beatrice. "Until I know who held the missing key, you are under my protection." The words should have made the corridor feel safer. Instead, they made every face turn toward her with new calculation. Protection from a duke was not a small thing. It was shelter. It was also a lantern raised in darkness, revealing every enemy who preferred to work unseen. Lady Honoria saw it. Mistress Pike saw it. Beatrice saw it most clearly of all. Adrian Westcombe stepped back from the Blue Nursery door. His voice lowered, but it carried to the farthest end of the corridor. "Now I will ask only once more today. Who locked the door?" The Duke did not receive an answer in the corridor, and perhaps that was answer enough. Lady Honoria lowered her eyes with the practiced patience of a woman enduring male inconvenience. Mistress Pike stood with her hands folded so tightly that the knuckles pressed white beneath the skin. Beatrice remained beside the Blue Nursery door and felt the house shift around her. A quarter of an hour ago, every person in Harrow-mere Park had watched her disgrace as though it had been settled by rank, propriety, and the neat return of a ring of keys. Now the same walls seemed to listen for another sound altogether. Truth had not entered boldly. It had slipped in through a missing key, a child's whisper, and a line of blue wax caught where no wax had any reason to be. "The children," the Duke said at last. "I will see them." Lady Honoria lifted her head. "They have been unsettled enough for one afternoon. Then they will be seen gently." His gaze moved to Beatrice. "Miss Lydgate, will they speak more easily if you are present?" Lady Honoria answered before Beatrice could. "That would be most unwise. The children are excessively attached to her. Such attachments are precisely what has clouded their behavior." Beatrice felt the old danger of being useful and suspect in the same breath. Her governess was expected to improve children without winning their love, to comfort them without becoming necessary, to shape their days without leaving any mark deep enough to offend the family. "I will not question them, Your Grace," she said. "But if Lady Imogen is frightened, I may be able to steady her. That is what I asked." He turned toward the nursery maid waiting at the far end of the passage. "Bring them to the day nursery, Mrs." Alder will remain. Lady Honoria, you may accompany us, but you will not prompt them." For the first time, Lady Honoria's smile failed to arrive. The day nursery stood across the corridor from the schoolroom, brighter than the Blue Nursery, and warmed by a coal fire that should have been larger for the season. A low table held Percy's wooden animals, a stack of copybooks, and 2 half-finished drawings of Harrow-mere Park, each with too many chimneys and too little sky. Beatrice noticed at once that the children's wool shawls were folded over the chair backs, not around their shoulders. She said nothing. The Duke noticed too. His eyes paused on the shawls, then on the fire, then on Beatrice's face, as if silently adding each small neglect to some private ledger. Lady Imogen entered first, holding herself with the painful dignity of a child who had been corrected too often for tears. Percy followed with his toy soldier, tucked against his chest. He had made that soldier from a broken chess piece, 2 buttons, and a sliver of painted wood. Beatrice had helped him glue the hat. Now his fingers covered the soldier's feet as though protecting a secret. "Lady Imogen," the Duke said, and his voice altered. It remained low, but the command left it. "Master Percy, you are not in trouble." Percy looked at Lady Honoria. Imogen did not look at anyone but Beatrice. "Miss Lydgate is going away," Imogen said. The words were flat, as if saying them carefully might keep them from becoming true. Beatrice knelt at once, because dignity meant nothing if it required looking down at a frightened child. "I am here now, but she said you were wicked." Imogen's eyes shone. "She said you made me disobedient." "Children repeat confusion when adults speak too freely," Lady Honoria said. The Duke did not turn. "Lady Honoria," only her name. It silenced the room more completely than a reprimand would have done. Beatrice held out her hand, palm upward, not reaching for Imogen. Choice mattered, even in small things. Imogen stared at it. Then she came forward and placed her fingers in Beatrice's hand with a suddenness that made the nursery maid cover her mouth. Percy moved too, not all the way, but close enough to press his shoulder against Beatrice's sleeve. The Duke watched that small movement as if it were testimony. "I am going to ask very little," he said to the children. "If you do not wish to answer, you may say so. If you are tired, you may stop. Do you understand?" Percy nodded. Imogen whispered, "Yes, uncle." The word seemed to catch the Duke unprepared. Beatrice saw it, though the change was almost nothing. A pause, a breath held half a moment too long. He had been absent often enough that the title of uncle sounded less like a claim than a reminder. He drew a chair nearer, but did not sit too close. "Lady Imogen, when you were in the Blue Nursery, did Miss Lydgate put you there?" Imogen's grip tightened painfully around Beatrice's fingers. "No. Did you see who locked the door?" The child looked at Lady Honoria. The answer died in her throat. Beatrice felt her hand tremble and curved her own fingers gently around it. "You need not answer that now," Beatrice said. "Truth does not run away because a child takes time." The Duke looked at her again. There it was, that keen attention, as if he had expected fear from her and found discipline instead. "Very well," he said. "We will not ask that now." Lady Honoria made a soft sound of impatience. "Adrian, this delicacy only encourages drama. I prefer drama to terror." Percy glanced up then, startled by the word. His thumb shifted over the toy soldier's wooden feet. Something pale and frayed showed beneath it. Beatrice noticed, but did not reach. If Percy was hiding it, he had a reason. The Duke's gaze followed hers. He saw the movement. He did not pounce on it. That restraint, more than his title, made Beatrice trust him by the smallest dangerous degree. "Master Percy," he said, "you have a fine soldier there." Percy's eyes widened. "He isn't fine. His leg is crooked. Many soldiers have returned from war with worse and still stood bravely." Percy considered this with grave suspicion. He was in the corridor. Lady Honoria's head turned. Percy, the child flinched so sharply that Beatrice's heart clenched. The Duke saw it. His face hardened. "Do not correct him for answering me." Percy pressed closer to Beatrice. "He was near the blue door," he whispered. "I dropped him when Mrs. Pike said we mustn't make noise." Mistress Pike, who had followed them no farther than the threshold, went still. "Children leave toys everywhere," she said. "It means nothing." "It may mean exactly that," the Duke replied, "or it may mean more." Percy's lower lip trembled. "The blue door only opens that way when Mrs. Pike brings the blue key." The room stopped. Even the coal fire seemed to settle without sound. Beatrice did not look at Mistress Pike. She did not dare. She kept her eyes on Percy, because if every adult in the room turned his brave whisper into spectacle, he might never speak again. "That was well said," she told him softly. "You have done nothing wrong." Lady Honoria moved toward the children with a rustle of black silk. "This is intolerable. Miss Lydgate has made them theatrical and disobedient. They now imagine household matters as nursery tales." Imogen shrank back so quickly that her elbow struck the table. A copybook fell to the rug. The sound was small, but the Duke rose as if it had called him by name. "You will not approach them when they are afraid of you." Lady Honoria froze. Color rose beneath her powder. "Afraid of me? Adrian, you cannot seriously believe a governess over your own blood." "I believe children who flinch before they are touched." Beatrice felt the words move through her like warmth after a long cold. Not comfort, not romance. Something steadier, witness. It was a terrible relief to discover that another person had seen what she had been seeing for months. Imogen began to cry without sound, tears slipping down her cheeks as she tried not to make herself troublesome. Beatrice pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and dabbed the child's face. "Breathe with me, my dear. In through the nose. Slowly. There, no one is displeased with you." "You are," Imogen whispered to the Duke. He looked struck. "No, you never come." The accusation was so small and so clean that no adult defense could stand before it. The Duke's jaw tightened. He took a moment before answering. "That is true," Lady Honoria said quickly. "His Grace has responsibilities beyond childish demands. And yet the children were my responsibility." His eyes remained on Imogen. "I failed in that. I will not fail by refusing to hear you now." Beatrice looked down because the intimacy of that admission felt almost improper to witness. The Duke of Harrow-mere, cold and remote before a household, had just accepted blame from an 8-year-old girl. No grand speech could have done more. Percy shifted again. The frayed thing beneath his soldier slipped free. It was a strip of pale ribbon, torn at one end and marked with a faint blue smear. Beatrice saw Imogen stare at it and go white. The Duke saw that too. "May I look at that?" he asked. Percy hesitated. Then he placed the toy soldier on the table but kept the ribbon in his fist. "Not if she takes it," he said, looking toward Mistress Pike. The housekeeper gave a shocked little gasp. "Master Percy, I have never taken anything from you." Percy's mouth trembled. "You took the page." The Duke turned very slowly. "What page?" Percy swallowed. "The page with the blue key." Lady Honoria spoke sharply. "Enough. These children are overwrought." "No," the Duke said. "They are frightened. There is a difference." He held out his hand, not to Percy, but toward the door. "Mistress Pike, bring me the household key register. Bring the nursery accounts as well." Mistress Pike did not move. "Now," he said. The housekeeper curtsied and withdrew, but her steps were uneven. Lady Honoria's expression settled into a mask of injured dignity. "You will regret allowing this scene to proceed. I regret that it was ever necessary." The Duke's gaze moved once more to Beatrice. "Miss Lydgate, remain with them." It was not a dismissal. It was trust. Beatrice bowed her head because any words would have carried too much. When Mistress Pike returned with the register, the Duke placed it on the low nursery table, among the copybooks and wooden animals. It was a heavy book bound in brown leather, its corners worn by years of household authority. He opened it to the section marked Nursery Wing. The first lines were neat: schoolroom cupboard, linen press, hearthguard, prize drawer. Then came a narrow, ragged space where one page had been cut away with careful, patient strokes. The Duke touched the severed edge. His voice when he spoke was very soft. Someone has been more exact than careless. Beatrice looked at the missing page, then at the children, then at the empty doorway through which Mistress Pike had retreated. The Blue Nursery key had not been lost. It had been removed from the record itself. By dusk, the missing page had become louder than any confession. It lay before them by its absence, a clean slice in the household register where the Blue Nursery key should have been named, numbered, and assigned. The Duke closed the book with such care that the sound was almost gentle. Beatrice had expected him to rage. Lady Honoria had prepared herself for rage too. One could see it in the way she stood near the nursery hearth, chin lifted, eyes solemn, already arranging forgiveness for herself before blame had been offered. But Adrian Westcombe did not rage. He summoned order. Within the hour, a groom had ridden through the rain to fetch Mr. Hargreaves, the family solicitor, who had been staying at the market town to review leases for the Harrow-mere tenants. Mistress Alder took Beatrice to the east guest room long enough for her to remove her bonnet and wash her face. The room was not grand, but it was warm, and that warmth almost undid her. A woman could endure accusation in a cold hall if she locked every feeling behind her ribs. It was harder to endure a clean towel, a steady fire, and an older maid quietly saying, "There now, miss. Sit a moment before they ask more of you." Beatrice sat only until her hands stopped shaking. She did not trust comfort that came before justice. When a footman came to say, His Grace requested her presence in the small library, she rose at once. Mistress Alder accompanied her, as the Duke had ordered, and Beatrice understood the care of it. A closed door could damage a governess more surely than a cruel speech. The small library was panelled in dark oak and smelled of leather, damp wool, and ink. The Duke stood by the writing table, still in his travel-dark coat, as though the long road from London had no claim upon his body. Mr. Hargreaves sat with a folio open, his pen laid ready. He was a narrow man with iron-grey hair and the grave expression of someone who had spent his life watching respectable families hide disorder beneath polished signatures. Lady Honoria sat in the chair nearest the fire. Mistress Pike remained near the door, neither servant nor family in that moment, but something suspended between usefulness and danger. The nursery key ring lay on the table beside the torn register. 4 keys, the brass acorn, an empty place where the truth should have hung. Miss Lydgate, the Duke said, Mr. Hargreaves will record what is said. This is a household inquiry, not a public charge. You will answer only what you know. Lady Honoria looked toward the solicitor with mild distress. Surely we need not dignify a child's confusion with formal proceedings. Mr. Hargreaves dipped his pen. His Grace has requested a record. His Grace, the Duke said, requires one. Beatrice felt those words settle the room. For 18 months she had been corrected, instructed, warned, and measured by people whose authority rested on proximity to power. Now power itself had turned toward the facts. It did not make her safe. It made truth possible. Begin with the night itself, the Duke said. Beatrice folded her hands in her lap. Lady Imogen and Master Percy had been put to bed after their prayers. Mistress Lorne, the nursery maid, had left to fetch warm milk, because Master Percy could not sleep. I remained in the schoolroom to mark Lady Imogen's copywork. Mr. Hargreaves wrote without looking up. Time? A little after 8 in the evening. You are certain? Lady Honoria asked softly. Miss Lydgate has always had a dramatic sense of time when children are unsettled. The Duke did not turn his head. Lady Honoria, you will have your opportunity. Beatrice continued. I heard crying from the corridor. Not ordinary crying. Lady Imogen was calling for someone to open the door. I went to the Blue Nursery and tried the latch. It would not lift. Her throat tightened. She saw it again, the pale blue door, her own hand on the iron, the child's voice trapped behind wood. I pulled the bell rope. It came away. I thought the rope had broken with age, but afterward I saw the upper end had been cut and tucked back. You saw that when? The Duke asked. That night by lamplight, but only briefly. Mistress Pike came before I could examine it. Mistress Pike lifted her head. I came because Miss Lydgate was creating alarm in the passage. I was knocking on a locked door with a child behind it. Beatrice looked at her for the first time. Alarm was appropriate. The pen paused. Lady Honoria's mouth thinned. The Duke's eyes rested on Beatrice for one brief moment, not with approval exactly, but with attention that did not flinch from her anger. What did Mistress Pike do? He asked. She told me I was upsetting Lady Imogen more by calling through the door. She said the corridor was too dark and that I should fetch another lamp from the schoolroom. And did you? Yes. The shame of that obedience still burned. I thought steadier light might help. I was gone perhaps 1 minute. When I returned, the door was open. Lady Imogen was outside. Mistress Pike held her by the shoulders. Where was the key? Beatrice shook her head. I did not see it. Did you see any person holding it? No. Lady Honoria leaned forward. Then this entire matter rests upon what Miss Lydgate did not see. The Duke looked at her then. It also rests upon a missing register page, a cut bell rope, fresh scratches on the outer latch, blue wax in the lock, and a child who says Miss Lydgate knocked from outside. Lady Honoria's face remained smooth, but the hand on her chair arm tightened. Children say many things when encouraged. They say fewer things when afraid. The words fell coldly. Beatrice looked down before gratitude could show too plainly. Mr. Hargreaves asked, Miss Lydgate, did anything else strike you as unusual that evening? A sound, a smell, a person in the corridor, any object misplaced. Beatrice almost said no. Then memory, which had been buried beneath fear, rose with sudden clarity. A glove. Not the color. Not the hand. The scent. She lifted her head slowly. There was lavender starch. Lady Honoria became perfectly still. The Duke noticed. Explain, when I returned with the lamp, someone passed close to me near the door. I did not see clearly because the flame guttered, but I smelled lavender starch. It was strong. Not lavender water, starch used for gloves or fine linen. Mistress Pike gave a small, brittle laugh. Half the house uses lavender in the laundry. Not that kind, Beatrice said. The nursery linen is plain starch. The children's things smell of soap and sunlight when weather allows. This was sharper, refined. I had noticed it before, on Lady Honoria's gloves when she came to inspect the copybooks. The silence afterward was so complete that the scratch of Mr. Hargreaves's pen seemed improper. Lady Honoria's cheeks colored faintly, then cooled. I will not have my gloves turned into evidence of wickedness. No one has called them that, the Duke said. Not yet. The air changed. Beatrice knew it, and so did Lady Honoria. Until that moment, Beatrice had been the governess attempting to defend herself. Now she had offered a detail no guilty woman would have chosen, because it was small, particular, and dangerous only if true. Mr. Hargreaves set down the pen. Your Grace, the page removed from the register, the wax, and Miss Lydgate's recollection should be preserved in sequence. They will be. Lady Honoria rose. This has gone far enough. Adrian, You continue. You will drag those children through county gossip until every drawing room from York to London knows that something shameful occurred in your nursery. Something shameful did occur. Then contain it. Her voice lowered, urgent and polished. Send Miss Lydgate away quietly. Say she resigned due to delicate health. Keep Imogen from being questioned. Keep Percy from repeating servant nonsense. You owe your family discretion. Beatrice felt the old trap close again. Discretion, the noble word for burying the powerless. She forced herself not to look at the Duke. If he chose that path, she would know now. Better now than after hope had taken root. He walked to the table and placed one finger on the torn edge of the register. I owe my family truth. Lady Honoria's eyes hardened. You owe them rank. Rank without truth is only furniture in a large house. It was a strange answer, quiet and unsparing. Beatrice did not know why it moved her. Perhaps because he sounded not like a duke defending pride, but like a man discovering the cost of having mistaken silence for peace. He turned to her. Miss Lydgate, earlier today you were made to stand in my hall as though judgment had already been passed. That should not have happened under my roof. Beatrice's hands tightened in her lap. Apology from a duke was rare enough to be alarming. Apology before witnesses was rarer still. Thank you, Your Grace. That is not forgiveness, he said. Nor did I ask for it. She met his eyes then. I accept the apology, Your Grace. I cannot absolve what I do not yet understand. For the first time, something almost human passed over his face. Not a smile, not softness. A recognition of equal terms where society had provided none. Fairly said. Lady Honoria turned away as if the exchange offended her more than accusation had. Mr. Hargreaves sanded the page and closed his folio. The Duke issued his orders with measured precision. Beatrice would remain in the east guest room with Mistress Alder nearby. No servant was to remove any paper, key, ribbon, rope, or nursery item from the upper floor. The children were not to be corrected, coached, or questioned outside his presence. Mistress Pike was to produce the complete household key press before breakfast. Each command tightened the net by inches. Beatrice felt it, and with it came fear. A trapped person, if innocent, cried out. A trapped villain made plans. The meeting ended near 10 in the evening. Mistress Alder walked with Beatrice toward the east corridor, candle in hand. Behind them, the library door remained ajar. The Duke stayed within, speaking low to Mr. Hargreaves. Beatrice had taken only 5 steps when something pale slid beneath the library door from the darkness of the passage beyond. A folded note. She stopped. The Duke saw her stop. He crossed the room and picked it up before anyone else could move. There was no seal, only a hurried line in black ink. He read it once. His expression did not alter, but the room seemed to grow colder around him. Beatrice knew before he spoke that the house had answered his inquiry. He turned the paper so Mr. Hargreaves could read the words, "Send Miss Lydgate away, or the children will suffer worse." The note remained on the library table all night, though the Duke would not allow Beatrice to touch it. He ordered it, placed beneath a paperweight, and left where every person in that room could see what fear looked like when written by a steady hand. Send Miss Lydgate away, or the children will suffer worse. The words followed Beatrice to the east guest room, waited beside her candle, and entered every small sound beyond the door. She did not sleep. Each creak of timber became a step in the nursery passage. Each shift of rain against the glass became Imogen, calling from behind blue-painted wood. Mistress Alder dozed in the chair by the hearth, with her knitting fallen into her lap, but Beatrice sat upright until dawn thinned the window to grey. By breakfast, the house had learned to whisper differently. Yesterday, people had spoken of a dismissed governess. This morning, they spoke of a threat. No one knew who had written it. Everyone knew who would benefit if she left. At 9 o'clock she was summoned again to the small library, where the Duke had exchanged his travel coat for sober morning black, and Mr. Hargreaves had laid fresh paper before him. The nursery key ring rested near the inkstand. So did the torn register. Mistress Pike entered, carrying the household key press ledger, with the air of a woman wronged by inconvenience. Lady Honoria followed a moment later, dressed in dove-grey silk, as if soft colour could make her appear above suspicion. "I trust we are not to spend the entire day counting keys," she said. "The children need calm." "They need coal," the Duke replied. The answer was so unexpected that even Mr. Hargreaves looked up. Adrian had a second book open before him. Beatrice recognized it at once. The nursery accounts. She had seen the outside of that leather volume many times in Mistress Pike's hands, but never the pages within. "Miss Lydgate," the Duke said, "you will tell me if any entry appears inconsistent with what was supplied to the nursery." Lady Honoria's brows rose. "A governess is hardly trained in accounts. A governess knows whether a child has a blanket." Beatrice felt the quiet force of that sentence more sharply than any kindness. It did not flatter her. It trusted her knowledge. She stepped closer to the table, careful to keep Mistress Alder within the open doorway. The Duke turned the book toward her. The first entry was ordinary enough. Soap, candles, mending thread. But then came coal for the nursery grates, marked generous enough for a warm winter. Beatrice looked at the number, and then at the memory of Percy wrapping his feet beneath him while he copied sums because the schoolroom hearth gave only a shallow heat. "That was not delivered," she said. Mistress Pike sniffed. Children complain of cold whenever they wish to avoid lessons. "Master Percy's ink froze at the edge of the bottle last January," Beatrice said. "I warmed it in my hands before copywork." The Duke's eyes lifted. Why was I not told? The question was not accusation, but it still struck a bruise. "I sent a note through the proper household channel, Your Grace. I was told economy had been ordered in the nursery wing." "By whom?" Beatrice looked at Mistress Pike. Mistress Pike looked at Lady Honoria. Lady Honoria said, "A house cannot be governed by every complaint from below stairs." "Miss Lydgate is not below stairs," the Duke said. "She is a gentlewoman employed in my household." The words altered the temperature of the room. Beatrice had heard the distinction argued before, usually to her disadvantage. A governess was not servant enough to find fellowship in the servants' hall, not family enough to sit without invitation in the drawing room, and not independent enough to be safe from either. To hear a duke name her station accurately was a small justice, and small justice could be more dangerous to the heart than grand rescue. Mr. Hargreaves turned another page. Primers, slates, wool stockings, 2 new nursery blankets. Beatrice looked at each entry and felt heat rise behind her eyes. The slates were not supplied. "I bought 2 from the village stationer in March, because Lady Imogen's was cracked through the corner. The stockings were darned old ones from the linen room. The blankets were never sent." The Duke's hand closed around the edge of the table. "You paid for supplies yourself?" "Only small things. That was not my question." Beatrice heard in his tone the same precision he had used beside the Blue Nursery door. It made evasion feel cowardly. "Yes, Your Grace," Lady Honoria gave a soft, pitying laugh. "Such gestures are admirable when sincere, but sentimental women often exaggerate their sacrifices. It gives them influence over children." Beatrice turned to her. "A slate pencil is not influence, my lady. It is a pencil." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the Duke looked down at the accounts again, and Beatrice saw the corner of his mouth harden, as if he had suppressed something too severe for the room. "Continue," he said. They did. Page after page, the nursery existed in ink as a place of comfort, order, and expense. In life it had been patched, stretched, and warmed by small economies Beatrice had never meant to confess. She had saved candle ends. She had cut the best portions from old copybooks. She had turned her own shawl over Imogen during a feverish night, when the child's blanket smelled of damp. None of it had seemed heroic at the time. It had seemed necessary. Necessity was often invisible until someone counted what should have been there and was not. Then Mr. Hargreaves paused. "Your Grace." He turned the book halfway toward the Duke. Adrian read the entry in silence. Beatrice could not see the writing until he shifted the page. Blue Nursery repairs. The sum beside it was large. Far too large for a locked, unused room with faded curtains, a narrow bed, and a rocking horse no one had repaired. "When were these repairs made?" the Duke asked. Mistress Pike's answer came a little late. "Over time, Your Grace. The old nursery wing requires constant attention. Name the workman. I would have to consult the tradesman's book." "You will." Lady Honoria rose from her chair. "Adrian, this is unseemly. You sit here tallying coal and blankets, as though your family honor depends upon a nursery bill." "At present, it may." Her face tightened. "No, it depends upon discretion. I have already written several calling cards for tomorrow's charity tea. The county expects composure from Harrow-mere Park. If you allow rumor to grow, every guest will arrive hungry for scandal." Beatrice felt the trap beneath the invitation. A charity tea sounded harmless, even benevolent. Yet Lady Honoria had a gift for arranging rooms where cruelty could look like concern. "Miss Lydgate need not attend," the Duke said. "On the contrary," Lady Honoria replied. "If she remains under your protection, her absence will speak louder than her presence. People will wonder why she is hidden." The word struck exactly where it was meant to. Hidden. Beatrice remembered standing in the hall with her keys on a tray, reduced to a lesson for servants. She would not become a secret now, because secrecy was convenient to those who had shamed her. The Duke looked at her, and perhaps he saw the decision forming before she spoke. "Your Grace," she said, "if the county is to be told that I am dangerous, I would rather they see me standing upright." Something moved in his expression. It was not approval alone. It was concern restrained by respect. "You owe them nothing. I owe myself the truth in daylight." Lady Honoria smiled faintly, as though Beatrice had stepped exactly where she wished. "How brave!" The Duke heard the poison. "Lady Honoria, you will not turn a charitable occasion into a tribunal. I would never dream of it." But her eyes said otherwise. The inquiry ended shortly after, not because the matter was finished, but because the house had begun to understand that missing money might be more dangerous to Lady Honoria than missing kindness. Mistress Pike carried the accounts away only after Mr. Hargreaves copied the disputed entries. The Duke kept the torn register and the nursery keys. As Beatrice moved toward the door, Mistress Alder touched her elbow and quietly offered a pair of gloves. They were plain, brown, and new. "From the linen room, miss," the older woman murmured. Beatrice knew they were not from any linen room. Her own gloves, mended at the fingertips, had been noticed. She looked back once. The Duke was speaking to Mr. Hargreaves, not watching her. That made the gift more difficult to bear. A careless man would have handed them to her before witnesses and called it kindness. A careful one had preserved her pride by pretending not to give. Beatrice closed her fingers around the gloves and felt, against her better judgment, the first fragile thread of trust. It frightened her more than Lady Honoria's smile. By late afternoon, the calling cards had gone out across the county, carried by footmen in polished boots. Harrow-mere Park would open its drawing room the next day for a small charitable tea in aid of orphaned children. By evening, the first replies arrived. Lady Selina Armitage accepted with pleasure. Lady Honoria read that card beside the fire, then looked across the room at Beatrice with perfect sweetness. "There," she said. "Tomorrow, Miss Lydgate, we shall see how well innocence behaves before society." By 3 o'clock the next afternoon, Harrow-mere Park had been polished into innocence. The drawing-room glowed with candlelight, and winter roses forced too early from the conservatory. Silver tea urns shone on the long table. Plates of seed cake and sugared biscuits stood in careful ranks, as if sweetness could discipline a room into kindness. Yet Beatrice knew better. A drawing-room could be as cruel as a courtroom when every chair held someone eager to judge and too well-bred to admit it. She stood near the window in her plain brown gown, the new gloves folded over her hands, while Mistress Alder remained close enough to satisfy propriety, and far enough away not to seem like a guard. The gloves fit perfectly. That was the trouble with them. Every time Beatrice felt the smooth seams against her fingers, she remembered that the Duke had noticed her mended ones and had chosen not to humiliate her by saying so. She wished the knowledge did not steady her. Across the room, Lady Honoria received guests with the serene grace of a woman, hosting a harmless, charitable afternoon. "How good of you to come, Lady Marwood. The orphaned children of the parish will be so grateful. Yes, such a difficult season." "No, His Grace is quite well, only burdened with estate matters. That was what Lady Honoria called missing keys, cut ropes, frightened children, and a note that threatened harm beneath the Duke's own roof. Beatrice watched the county ladies arrive, one by one, wrapped in silk, lace, and curiosity. Some had met her before, as the governess who brought Lady Imogen and Master Percy downstairs to greet visitors on approved occasions. Then she had been nearly invisible, a figure in dark wool, standing behind the children's shoulders. Today, invisibility had been withdrawn. Every glance found her. Every murmur leaned toward her, and then retreated behind a teacup. The word governess did not have to be spoken to lower a woman. It was enough that people remembered she was paid, unmarried, and present among those who could ruin her with a softened voice. Lady Selina Armitage arrived last. She was tall, fair, and dressed in pale blue silk that made her look younger than her carefully sharpened eyes. Her father was a baron with debts hidden beneath excellent manners, and her mother long been rumoured to hope that the Duke of Harrow-mere might be brought to admire their daughter's delicate breeding. Lady Selina kissed Lady Honoria's cheek with practised affection. "Dear Lady Honoria, what a beautiful gathering. You're always so devoted to good works." "One does what one can," Lady Honoria said. Her gaze flicked toward Beatrice. "Especially when children require guidance." Lady Selina followed the glance. Her expression warmed into pity, which was far worse than disdain. "Miss Lydgate, is it not? How brave of you to remain among us today." Beatrice curtsied. "Good afternoon, Lady Selina. I confess I should have hidden myself away after such an ordeal." Lady Selina lowered her voice just enough that the nearest ladies had to listen harder. "But perhaps hiding would make people imagine worse things." Beatrice felt the first hook slide beneath her ribs. She kept her shoulders relaxed. "People determined to imagine worse things rarely need assistance, my lady." Lady Selina blinked, then laughed softly. "How spirited. One sees why children might become attached." Near the tea table, Lady Honoria smiled into her cup. The trap was simple. If Beatrice stayed silent, she looked guilty. If she answered, she looked impertinent. If she showed pain, she became unstable. If she showed strength, she became dangerous. Lady Selina moved closer, bringing with her the scent of violet powder and triumph. "I do hope little Lady Imogen has recovered. Such a sensitive child. It must have been dreadful for her, shut in with only that old rocking horse and the blue key turned against her." The room seemed to tilt. Beatrice's hand tightened once around the folded gloves. The blue key, not the nursery door, not the locked room, the blue key. That detail had not been named before the county. It had been spoken only in the corridor, the day nursery, and the small library. Beatrice looked at Lady Selina's pretty face and saw, beneath the smooth skin of politeness, the faintest mistake. Lady Selina had enjoyed knowing too much. "What an interesting phrase," Beatrice said. Her voice remained even. "The blue key." Lady Selina's smile held, but the brightness faltered behind it. "I merely assumed. Old rooms often have names, don't they?" "Rooms, yes. Keys less often." Lady Honoria set down her cup. "Miss Lydgate, this is not the schoolroom. Guests do not come here to be examined." Beatrice turned toward her. "No, my lady. I believe that was why I was invited." A rustle moved through the ladies, not loud, never loud. Polite society did not gasp like a marketplace crowd. It breathed in, collectively, and with pleasure, when someone stood too near disaster. Lady Selina recovered her smile. "You mistake concern for accusation. We only wonder whether strict discipline became too much in the nursery. Some children require firmness, of course, but a sensitive child can be made obedient in unfortunate ways." Beatrice looked past her to the mantel clock. Each tick sounded suddenly distinct. The Duke had not entered. Mr. Hargreaves was nowhere in sight. Mistress Alder stood rigid near the window, her face pale with anger. She had no rank to spend. Beatrice could feel the room, waiting for her to defend herself badly. Instead, she thought of Imogen folding inward at Lady Honoria's command. She thought of Percy's toy soldier and the missing page. She thought of the Blue Nursery door opening after she had been sent away for a lamp. "Obedience," Beatrice said, "is a poor substitute for trust." Lady Selina's eyes sharpened. "A charming sentiment, but a governess is not hired to be adored." "No." Beatrice's voice softened. "She is hired to protect what others are too busy to see." Lady Honoria stood. Her silk skirts whispered like a warning. "That will do." "I think not," said the Duke from the doorway. The room went still. Adrian Westcombe stood just inside the drawing room, with Mr. Hargreaves beside him, and the quiet authority of a man who had heard enough before entering. He wore dark morning dress, severe and perfectly cut, and his face carried no expression that could be mistaken for temper. That made the room more cautious. Anger could be dismissed as passion. Control from a duke demanded obedience. Lady Honoria smiled as if his arrival were a blessing. "Adrian." "We were merely discussing the difficulty of managing impressionable children." "I heard." His gaze moved to Lady Selina. "I also heard Lady Selina mention a blue key." Lady Selina coloured prettily. "Your Grace, I'm sure I used the phrase without thinking. That appears to be a habit in this house." A silence followed. Beatrice lowered her eyes before anyone could see what his words did to her. He had not touched her. He had not praised her. He had done something far more dangerous in front of witnesses. He had treated the question as real. Lady Marwood cleared her throat. "Surely, Your Grace, no one intended harm at a charitable tea. Intentions are often dressed better than actions," he said. "Miss Lydgate is under my protection, while I inquire into a matter concerning my nursery. She is not to be questioned as though she were a criminal, because it pleases the room to have a subject." Several ladies looked away at once. Lady Honoria's smile tightened. "You make too much of feminine chatter." "No, I make exactly enough of it." He stepped farther into the room. "The children will not be used as drawing-room entertainment. Nor will their governess." Their governess. The phrase was formal. It should have been ordinary. Yet Beatrice felt the weight of it shift inside her. Not dismissed, not hidden, not wicked. Their governess, spoken before ladies who had arrived hungry for scandal. Lady Selina lowered her lashes. I apologize if I seemed unkind, Miss Lydgate. I don't know the whole story. Beatrice met her gaze. No, my lady, but you knew one detail too many. The room breathed in again. This time, the sound carried fear as well as appetite. Before Lady Selina could answer, a small crash came from the passage beyond the drawing room. A cup rattled on its saucer. Someone near the door turned. Then Lady Imogen appeared in the threshold, white-faced, with Percy's behind her, and the nursery maid hurrying after them. She must have heard the raised voices from the corridor. Or perhaps only one word had reached her. Obedience. Lady Honoria moved first. Imogen, return upstairs at once. The child looked at her, and all the fragile composure Beatrice had helped build since morning broke apart. Imogen turned and ran, not toward the main staircase, not towards the safety of the day nursery. She fled down the side passage that led to the nursery wing, her grey skirts flashing once before the corner swallowed her. Percy cried out, "Imogen!" Beatrice was already moving when the Duke's voice cut through the room. "No one follows except Miss Lydgate and me." Lady Honoria stepped forward. "Adrian, don't be absurd." He did not even look at her. "Stay here." Then he strode toward the passage, and Beatrice followed, carrying with her the terrible certainty that the house had not finished using its locked doors. Imogen was small enough that the corridor seemed to swallow her, but fear made her swift. Beatrice followed the flash of grey skirts past the side table, past the dim portrait of a Westcombe aunt, past the narrow window where rain dragged silver lines down the glass. The Duke moved ahead of her with long, controlled strides, not running, never careless, yet fast enough that the footmen stationed near the passage flattened themselves against the wall. Behind them, the drawing room had not remained obedient. Beatrice could hear the disturbed murmur of ladies rising, cups set down too sharply, Lady Honoria's silk skirts sweeping after them despite the Duke's command. Scandal had scented movement. It would not stay seated. "Imogen," Beatrice called, keeping her voice low, because a frightened child did not need another alarm chasing her. "My dear, stop where you are. No one is displeased with you." The corridor turned toward the nursery wing, and the air changed at once. Warm tea and roses vanished behind them. Chalk dust, cold polish, and old linen returned. Somewhere ahead, something rang. Beatrice stopped so suddenly that the Duke turned back. It was a faint sound, no louder than a spoon striking glass below stairs, but it came from the direction of the Blue Nursery. One clear little ring. Then silence. The Duke's face hardened. The bell rope was cut. "Yes," Beatrice whispered. "It should not ring." They moved together now, urgency sharpened by restraint. At the end of the corridor, Imogen stood frozen outside the Blue Nursery door. She was not inside. Thank heaven, she was not inside. She had one hand pressed to the blue-painted panel, and the other locked around Percy's crooked toy soldier, as if she had carried it there without knowing why. Her face was drained of color. Her eyes were fixed on the bell-pull beside the door, the same tassel the Duke had examined the previous day. It hung motionless. "It rang," Imogen said. "I heard it." Beatrice took one step, then stopped. If she rushed, Imogen might break. If she held back, the child might think she was alone again. "I believe you." Imogen turned toward her, with a look so nakedly grateful that Beatrice felt it like a wound. "I heard it from the passage. It was like that night. I thought maybe someone was inside. I thought maybe Percy's soldier was calling." Percy's soldier. Beatrice looked at the toy. A pale thread clung beneath its wooden foot, almost hidden by Imogen's fingers. Before she could speak, voices swelled at the far end of the corridor. Lady Honoria had arrived with Lady Selina, Lady Marwood, two other county ladies, and Mr. Hargreaves following with grave reluctance. The nursery maid hovered behind them, wringing her hands. Percy stood half-hidden beside her, stricken at the sight of his toy in Imogen's grip. Lady Honoria saw the scene and understood at once how useful it could become. Her face softened into public sorrow. "Oh, Imogen, what has Miss Lydgate done to you now?" The child recoiled. Beatrice felt the sentence strike the walls and travel back toward the assembled guests. "Miss Lydgate, done to you now, 3 little hooks cleanly placed." The Duke turned. "Lady Honoria, you were told to remain in the drawing room and leave a distressed child to be managed by the very woman who has made her so." Lady Honoria's voice trembled beautifully. "Adrian, look at her. Look at where she has run. This is not natural childhood fear. This is suggestion, influence. The poor child has been taught to perform terror." Lady Selina murmured, "How dreadful." It was soft enough to sound accidental and clear enough for everyone to hear. Beatrice looked at the women gathered in the passage. Their faces had changed since the tea table. Curiosity had become certainty's younger sister. None of them knew what had happened, but all of them understood the pleasure of a conclusion. Beatrice could defend herself. She could say she had not lured Imogen here. She could say she had followed only because the child ran. Yet each word would sound like desperation if offered too quickly. Instead, she turned back to Imogen. "Give Percy his soldier, my dear." Slowly, Imogen looked down, confused, as if only now realizing what she held. "I found him near the door," Percy whispered. "He was in my pocket." Lady Honoria seized the opening. "There." The children are confused beyond reason. One imagines bells that cannot ring. Another imagines missing toys. This is precisely the disorder I feared. The Duke crossed to the bell pull. He did not tug it. He lifted the tassel and examined the cord where it disappeared into the wall. "This knot is new." Mistress Pike was not in the corridor, Beatrice noticed. The absence felt deliberate. "Your Grace," Lady Honoria said, "must we turn every childish fancy into an inspection? When a cut bell rings, yes." The short answer silenced even Lady Selina. Beatrice knelt before Imogen, not touching her until the child leaned forward first. The little girl trembled from shoulder to wrist. "You did well to come no farther," Beatrice said. "You stopped outside the door. That was brave." "I thought I was bad again," Imogen said, her voice cracked. "I thought if I did not come, someone would say I was disobedient." The word obedience seemed to pass through the corridor like a hidden draught. Lady Honoria's eyes flashed, then softened again for the audience. "You see, Adrian?" She repeats language Miss Lydgate has clearly placed in her mouth. Beatrice rose. She had spent years learning that anger in a governess was called hysteria, while cruelty in a lady was called concern. She kept her voice calm, because calm was the only weapon society had not forbidden her to carry. "No, my lady." She repeats language she has heard too often. A rustle moved through the guests. Lady Marwood looked away. Lady Selina's brows lifted with delicate offence. The Duke stepped closer to Beatrice, not near enough to create impropriety, but near enough that the corridor understood his position. "Miss Lydgate did not bring Lady Imogen here. I saw the child run before Miss Lydgate moved." Lady Honoria inclined her head. "You saw the result, not the cause." There it was, the deeper accusation. Not an action to prove, but an atmosphere to blame. Beatrice was not charged with opening a door or turning a key. She was accused of being the sort of woman around whom children became inconveniently truthful. Imogen reached suddenly for Beatrice's hand. "Don't send her away." The child said it to the Duke, but the words belonged to the whole corridor. "Please don't," she knocked. She kept knocking. "She didn't leave me." Percy began to cry then, silently and with great effort, pressing his fist against his mouth. Beatrice wanted to gather them both and shut out every polished witness, every cold eye, every rule that made children plead before adults who ought to have protected them first. She did not. She looked at the Duke. For the first time, she let him see what it cost her to remain still. The children should not be here. Adrian's expression changed. Not visibly to the others, perhaps, but Beatrice saw it. He understood the request beneath the words. "Protect them, not me." "Mrs. Alder," he said. The older maid stepped forward at once from the back of the passage, where she had followed despite no one noticing. "Take Lady Imogen and Master Percy to the morning room. Stay with them. No one is to enter without my permission," Lady Honoria said. "They are Westcombe blood. You cannot place them under a maid over my objection. I can remove them from a scene that is harming them." His eyes did not leave hers. "And I will." Mrs. Alder took the children gently. Imogen would not release Beatrice's hand until Beatrice bent and whispered, "I am not leaving this corridor because I choose fear. I am staying because truth needs a witness. Go with Mrs. Alder." The child nodded, barely. Percy pressed the toy soldier into Beatrice's palm before he went. "He heard it too," he whispered. Then the children were gone. The corridor felt larger and colder without them. Beatrice looked down at the toy soldier. Beneath one wooden foot, a smear of pale blue wax clung to a frayed thread. The Duke saw it at the same time. So did Lady Honoria. Her expression did not change, but her fingers closed hard around the lace at her cuff. Lady Selina noticed the movement and quickly looked away. "This has become intolerable," Lady Honoria said. For the children's nerves, for the dignity of this house, and for Miss Lydgate herself, she must be removed from the main rooms at once. The guests heard dignity. Beatrice heard exile. The Duke was silent too long. Only a few seconds, perhaps, but long enough for doubt to enter like water beneath a door. He looked toward the morning room where the children had gone, then toward the gathered ladies, then back at Beatrice. His jaw tightened with the look of a man choosing among harms. "Miss Lydgate will not be dismissed," he said. Relief rose, but stopped when he continued. "For tonight, she will remove to the dower cottage within the estate. Mrs. Alder will accompany her. It will keep her beyond reach of household interference while I continue this inquiry." Beatrice understood his intention at once. Protection. Distance. Shelter from Lady Honoria's corridor and the county's appetite. She also understood what everyone else would hear. Lady Honoria heard it too. Her eyes lowered to conceal victory. Lady Selina looked faintly satisfied. Lady Marwood's mouth tightened with the grim mercy of a woman who would later say the Duke had been wise to separate the governess from the children. Beatrice held the crooked toy soldier in her gloved hand and felt something inside her close, not against truth, but against hope that came too easily from powerful men. "As your grace commands," she said. The formality struck him. She saw that it did. For one instant, Adrian Westcombe looked as though he wished to answer not as a duke before witnesses, but as a man who had made a wound while trying to stop another. He did not speak. Neither did she. Behind them the Blue Nursery door remained shut. The bell rope hung still. And in Beatrice's palm, beneath the toy soldier's foot, the blue wax waited like a secret that had not yet decided whom it would destroy. The dower cottage stood half a mile from the main house, close enough for Harrow-mere Park to claim it, and far enough for rumour to make use of the distance. Beatrice saw it through the carriage window, as evening folded itself across the wet fields, a square stone house with ivy dark against the walls, and one lamp burning behind a lower pane. It should have looked peaceful. It did not. Peace chosen freely could comfort a woman. Peace assigned after public doubt felt very much like being placed where the stain would show less. Mistress Alder sat opposite her, hands clasped around a basket of linen, her face pinched with sympathy. She was too kind to spend carelessly. On the seat between them lay Beatrice's small trunk, returned once from disgrace and now sent away again under a gentler name. In her lap, Beatrice held Percy's crooked toy soldier. The blue wax beneath its wooden foot had been wrapped in a scrap of paper at the Duke's order before she left the nursery corridor. Evidence, Mr. Hargreaves had called it. Beatrice had almost laughed when she heard the word. Evidence could lie on a table and wait. A woman's reputation could not. By the time the carriage stopped before the cottage, 2 footmen had already arrived. One opened the door. The other took a post near the gate as if Harrow-mere Park had suddenly become a border to be guarded. "His Grace's orders, miss," the footman said, not unkindly. "No one is to approach without permission." Beatrice stepped down. Her shoes touched the damp gravel. She looked back toward the distant glow of the great house, where Lady Honoria would already be explaining the change to the guests. Not dismissal, perhaps. Not exactly. A removal, a precaution. A merciful separation for the sake of the children. Words could be polished until they shone like silver, but they still cut. Inside, the cottage was clean and old-fashioned, with a small parlor, a narrow staircase, and a fire newly lit by some hurried hand. Someone had placed bread, cheese, tea, and apples on the table. The kindness of it nearly broke her composure. A woman who had been publicly doubted did not wish to be grateful for crumbs of comfort. Mistress Alder set down her basket. "You should eat something, miss, later. You said that at luncheon, then I was consistent." Mistress Alder almost smiled, then did not. "His Grace meant to keep you safe." Beatrice removed her gloves finger by finger, the new gloves, the secret gift. She placed them on the table and looked at them as though they belonged to someone else. "Yes, that is what makes it difficult." Difficult. If he had meant cruelty, I could despise it cleanly. She looked toward the window, where the last light had turned the glass black. He meant protection. Yet everyone saw me sent away from the children after Lady Honoria named me harmful. Meaning does not control what society hears. Mistress Alder had no answer, because the truth of that was older than either of them. Beatrice went upstairs to the small bedchamber with the sloped ceiling. Her trunk had been placed at the foot of the bed. She lifted the lid, intending only to take out a shawl. The top layer held her folded brown gown, a spare collar, 2 books, and the worn leather copy of sermons her father had left her. Something white protruded beneath the book. Beatrice frowned. She had packed no loose paper there. She drew it out. One line, written in a hand that tried to resemble her own careful script, stared back at her. "Lock her until she learns obedience." For a moment the room did not move. The fire below gave a small pop. Mistress Alder called her name from the stair, but the sound seemed far away. Beatrice held the note by its corner and felt cold settle into her fingers. The phrase was not only accusation, it was design. Whoever had written it understood what the county ladies had heard, what Lady Honoria had implied, what the Duke's removal of her would make easier to believe. Obedience. The word had chased Imogen down the corridor. Now it had been placed among Beatrice's things like a snake in folded linen. Mistress Alder appeared at the door. "Miss Lydgate." Beatrice turned the paper toward her. The older woman went pale. "Mercy, do not touch it." Beatrice heard how calm she sounded, and wondered distantly whether that was what shock did when a woman had been trained too long not to scream. "Send for his Grace. And Mr. Hargreaves, if he is still at the house." "Yes, miss." Mistress Alder hurried away. Beatrice stood beside the trunk, staring at the forged words until they blurred. The hand was not perfect. The B bent too sharply. The long letters leaned with too much effort. But anyone who had seen only her copybooks from a distance, anyone predisposed to think her guilty, could believe it. That was the genius of polite cruelty. It did not need truth. It only needed plausibility placed in the right drawer, the right trunk, the right whispering room. The Duke arrived before full dark, without ceremony, his boots damp from the walk across the grounds, and Mr. Hargreaves close behind him. A trusted footman remained outside the cottage door. Adrian entered the parlour and stopped when he saw Beatrice standing by the table with the paper beneath an inverted glass. "Where was it?" he asked. No greeting, no wasted alarm. "In my trunk beneath my father's book." His eyes sharpened at that detail, perhaps because even a stranger could understand the insult of hiding a lie beneath a dead man's sermons. Mr. Hargreaves bent over the note without touching it. "The hand resembles yours, Miss Lydgate, but not naturally. It has been copied." "From my copybook," Beatrice said. The thought had already come fully formed. "The children use old samples of my hand for penmanship. I keep them in the schoolroom drawer, or I did." Adrian looked at her. "You are certain?" "I am certain. Someone wished me to appear foolish enough to preserve evidence of cruelty in my own trunk." Something bleak passed across his face. "This was placed after you left the main house, or before, by someone who knew I would be sent here." The sentence landed between them. The Duke looked away first, and that small movement told Beatrice he had understood. His wrong choice had not created the trap, but it had carried her into it. Mr. Hargreaves wrapped the note and took it into his folio. "Your Grace, Lady Honoria will use this by morning if she hears of it first. She will hear nothing from this cottage." "She will not need to," Beatrice said. Both men looked at her. "She watched me be sent away. So did Lady Selina. So did Lady Marwood. By now, every guest has been given the story before the evidence was even found." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I sent you here to keep you beyond her reach. You sent me where her story could reach before I could." The room fell silent. Mistress Alder stood near the hearth, eyes lowered, as if witnessing such speech between a duke and a governess frightened her more than the forged note. Beatrice knew she had stepped beyond caution. She could not step back, not now. "Your Grace," she said, and the title cost her, "will you protect my reputation by hiding me, or by hearing me?" He went very still. Outside, rain began again, soft against the cottage windows. Beatrice expected correction, a reminder of rank. Perhaps even the cold withdrawal of a man unused to being challenged by someone he had tried to help. Instead, he looked at the gloves folded on the table, at the toy soldier beside them, at the note sealed in Mr. Hargreaves's folio, and finally at her. "By hearing you," he said. The answer was quiet. It did not mend the wound, but it stopped it from deepening. "Then hear this. I will not be kept safe in a place where my silence is useful to Lady Honoria. I will not be grateful for protection that makes the children think I abandoned them, and I will not allow that note to become my voice." Adrian's expression altered, not softened, clarified. "What do you require?" The question nearly undid her, because it gave her what she had not been given since the keys touched the silver tray: agency. She placed Percy's toy soldier carefully on the table. "My old copybook is in the schoolroom wing. If it is still there, it may show how the forgery was made. If it is gone, that absence speaks too." Mr. Hargreaves frowned. "Returning to the main house tonight would be risky, so is remaining here while others write my character for me." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "You will not go alone. To go alone." A faint breath escaped him, almost a laugh and not one. "No. I begin to understand that you rarely ask for less than what is necessary." Beatrice did not smile. She was too tired for it, and too aware that trust once bruised did not bloom because one man answered well. Still, when the Duke stepped aside and opened the cottage door himself, he did not look like a man removing a problem. He looked like a man making room for the truth to walk back into his house. Lady Honoria had meant the dower cottage to turn Beatrice into an absence. Instead, before the rain had settled over the fields, Beatrice lifted her shawl, took Percy's toy soldier in her hand, and prepared to return as a witness against the lie hidden in her own name. The great house did not welcome Beatrice back. It received her in silence, which was worse. Harrow-mere Park rose through the rain like a judgment she had already survived once, and had been foolish enough to approach again. No carriage brought them this time. The Duke had chosen the servants' side path from the dower cottage, with Mr. Hargreaves on one side of Beatrice and Mistress Alder on the other, while a trusted footman carried the lantern ahead. The arrangement preserved more than secrecy. It preserved propriety, though Beatrice suspected propriety had become a thin cloak over danger. Dinner had begun in the main dining room. Through one rain-blurred window, she saw the glow of candles, the shadow of a footman passing with wine, and the pale flash of Lady Honoria's hand, lifting a glass as if nothing in the world had been disturbed. That was the talent of women like Lady Honoria. They could arrange ruin before soup and appear composed by the fish course. "The schoolroom wing is this way," Beatrice said softly. "We needn't pass the dining room." The Duke looked down at her. "You know the hidden paths of my house better than I do." There was no mockery in it, only recognition and perhaps regret. Beatrice kept her gaze ahead. Children and governesses are often expected to move where they won't trouble anyone. His step slowed by half a pace, then matched hers again. He did not apologize. She was grateful. Apology would have delayed them, and tonight she needed action more than remorse. They entered by a narrow door used for coal deliveries to the upper wing. The footman remained below. Mistress Alder went first with the lantern, her old shoes soundless on the back stairs. Every familiar turn sharpened Beatrice's senses. The linen cupboard, where she had once hidden Christmas ribbons for the children. The landing where Percy had sat in protest because long division had offended him. The schoolroom door closed now, with no lamplight under it. Beatrice paused with her hand on the latch. She had entered that room hundreds of times with slates, books, mended cups, tired patients, and the small daily courage required to make a home inside someone else's authority. Tonight, she entered as though stepping into a witness box. The schoolroom smelled of chalk, cold ashes, and ink. The children's desks stood side by side. Imogen's copywork lay neatly stacked, too neat for ordinary use. Percy's sums had been cleared away. Beatrice crossed at once to the drawer, where she kept penmanship samples. She opened it. Empty. For 1 second, the absence was so complete, she almost doubted her own memory. Then anger came, clean and clarifying. "It was here," she said. "The old copybook was here yesterday morning." Mr. Hargreaves moved closer. "You are certain?" "I used it to set Lady Imogen a capital G." The Duke's face had gone still in the dim lantern light. "Who had access?" "Any person with the schoolroom key, or anyone admitted by Mrs. Pike." Beatrice looked toward the inner door that led to the small supply room used by the nursery staff. "There is another place." "Miss Lydgate," Mistress Alder whispered. "That room is Mrs. Pike's charge." "Yes." Beatrice took the lantern from her gently. "That is why we must look." The supply room was narrower, colder, and more orderly than the schoolroom. Shelves held ink powder, old ribbon, soap, folded dust sheets, and lesson paper tied in bundles. Against the wall stood Mrs. Pike's small locked drawer chest. The ones she used for nursery stores, she claimed, were too easily wasted by children. The Duke tried the first drawer, locked. Beatrice looked at the ring of keys in his hand. The brass acorn tag glinted in the lantern light. A day ago, those keys had been returned as proof that she had lost trust. Now one of them opened the chest that might return it. The second key turned. The drawer slid out with a dry whisper. Inside lay Beatrice's missing copybook. For a moment, no one touched it. Its brown cover was familiar enough to hurt. Mr. Hargreaves drew a cloth from his pocket and lifted it carefully. Several pages had been pressed open and marked with faint smudges where another hand had traced the shapes of her letters. Beside it lay a stick of sealing wax, blue as old forget-me-nots, and a folded sheet covered with attempts at her script. Lock her until she learns obedience. The phrase appeared again and again, each line a little closer to her hand, each correction more patient than the last. Mistress Alder made a low sound. The Duke said nothing. His silence was not empty. It was gathering force. Beatrice reached past the copybook and saw another folded paper wedged beneath a packet of ribbons. There is more. Mr. Hargreaves unfolded it under the lantern. It was a duplicate account, not in the formal household book, but in Mrs. Pike's narrow hand. Coal reduced, blankets retained. Primers not ordered, repair fund transferred. At the bottom stood 2 words that tightened the room around Beatrice's breath. Blue Nursery. The Duke read them once. Then he read them again. Michaelmas, Beatrice said. The memory rose from the forged letter hidden in the cottage trunk. The Duke must believe Miss Lydgate unfit before Michaelmas. The accounts would be reviewed then, wouldn't they? Mr. Hargreaves looked at the Duke. Yes. Your Grace ordered a Michaelmas review before you left London last month. I wrote Lady Honoria of it. The last piece did not fall loudly. It settled with terrible precision. If the nursery accounts were to be reviewed, Beatrice had to be gone before anyone asked why money recorded for children had not reached them. A negligent governess could explain frightened children. A dismissed governess could not contradict missing coal, missing books, or a locked room charged for repairs. Beatrice stared at the copied lines of her own handwriting and felt not fear now, but a fierce and sorrowful steadiness. She did not only want me gone, she said. She needed me guilty. A board creaked outside the room. The Duke turned at once. The door opened before he reached it. Mrs. Pike stood in the threshold, her cap slightly askew, a candle shaking in her hand. Her eyes went to the open drawer, then to the copybook, then to the Duke. In that instant, all her household authority drained into naked calculation. Your Grace, she said, I didn't expect anyone in this wing during dinner. Plainly, the word was soft, Mrs. Pike swallowed. Those are nursery stores. Miss Lydgate has no right to disturb them. Beatrice stepped forward before the Duke could answer. My copybook is not a nursery store. The housekeeper's mouth flattened. You've been confused, miss. A difficult day can make any lady imagine patterns. I am not a lady when you wish to dismiss me, and not a servant when you wish to isolate me. You must choose one insult at a time, Mrs. Pike. Mistress Alder stared at her. Mr. Hargreaves bent his head to hide an expression that might have been approval. The Duke looked at Beatrice, and she saw that he had been about to defend her. She also saw that he understood why she had spoken first. This was her name on the forged page. Her hand imitated. Her character threatened. He could stand beside her, but he could not reclaim her voice by using his own over it. Mrs. Pike recovered badly. Lady Honoria will hear of this. She will, the Duke said, from me. Your Grace, I only obeyed the order of the household. I am the order of this household. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. You will go to the housekeeper's sitting room. You will remain there until Mr. Hargreaves records your statement. You will speak to no servant, no guest, and no child. Mrs. Pike curtsied, but resentment made the motion ugly. When she left, the corridor seemed to exhale. Beatrice looked down at Percy's toy soldier, which she had placed on the schoolroom table. The blue wax beneath its foot matched the stick in the drawer. So many small things had tried to speak. A child's toy, a cut page, a glove's scent, a bell that should not ring. She had been wrong to think innocence fragile because it lived in powerless hands. Innocence, too, could gather witnesses. The Duke came to stand across from her, the open drawer between them. "I owe you more than apology," he said. Beatrice shook her head once. Not now. His eyes held hers. Then, what now? She lifted the copied sheet. "Now we make certain Lady Honoria cannot call this imagination before breakfast." Footsteps sounded distantly from the main staircase. Not Mrs. Pike's this time. Lighter, faster. A maid's frightened tread. The girl appeared at the schoolroom door, and curtsied so low she nearly dropped the note she carried. "Beg pardon, Your Grace. Lady Honoria says there'll be a family council in the morning. She says Miss Lydgate is to answer for the paper found in her trunk." Beatrice looked at the forged lines in her hand, then at the blue wax waiting in the drawer. For the first time since the keys had rung on the silver tray, she did not feel cornered. She felt ready. Morning came to Harrow-mere Park with a hard, pale light that made every polished surface look honest and every face less so. Beatrice had slept scarcely an hour, yet she dressed with more care than she had given herself on any peaceful day. The brown gown was plain, the collar fresh, the new gloves folded but not worn. She wanted her hands visible. Let them see the fingers they had tried to turn into a forgery. Let them see she did not tremble. Mistress Alder fastened the last hook at her throat and said nothing until the knock came at the east guest room door. Then the older woman touched Beatrice's sleeve. "You are not alone, miss." Beatrice looked at the closed door. "That is not the same as being safe." "No," Mistress Alder's mouth firmed. "But it is more than yesterday, that was true, and truth, however small, deserved recognition." Beatrice followed the footman down the passage toward the drawing-room, where Lady Honoria had arranged justice like a tea service. The doors stood open. Inside waited Mr. Hargreaves with his folio, the Reverend Mr. Wycliffe from the parish, Lady Selina Armitage, Lady Marwood, 2 elderly Westcombe cousins, and several senior servants positioned near the wall. Mrs. Pike was there too, pale and rigid beside the locked household key press, which had been brought from her sitting-room at the Duke's command. Lady Honoria sat near the hearth in black silk, with the expression of one who had been forced into unpleasant duty for the sake of children. The Duke stood by the long table. On it lay the forged note from the cottage trunk, Beatrice's recovered copybook, the sheet of practiced handwriting, Percy's toy soldier wrapped in cloth, the blue wax, and the nursery key ring with its brass acorn tag. The room looked at Beatrice when she entered. Not one glance. Many, some curious, some cold, some embarrassed by the possibility that they had enjoyed her disgrace too soon. She crossed the carpet and curtsied to the Duke because rank remained rank, even when truth had entered the room. He inclined his head, not as a master receiving a subordinate, but as a man acknowledging a witness. Lady Honoria noticed. Her lips moved into a faint smile. "Miss Lydgate, how composed you are." Beatrice lifted her eyes. "I have had practice, my lady." Lady Selina looked down at her gloves, but not before Beatrice saw the flicker of satisfaction in her face. Lady Honoria turned to the others. "I asked you here reluctantly, but necessity allows no comfort." A paper was found among Miss Lydgate's possessions bearing words that no decent person could defend. She gestured toward the forged note. "Lock her until she learns obedience. I do not wish to condemn without hearing. Yet for the peace of this house, we must know whether the woman entrusted with the children has poisoned their minds and perhaps worse." The Reverend Wycliffe shifted uneasily. "Lady Honoria, perhaps we should avoid language that presumes guilt. "I presume only sorrow, Reverend." The Duke's voice cut across the room. "You presume authority that is not yours." The quietness of it struck harder than anger. Lady Honoria's colour changed, but she recovered with admirable speed. "Then let your authority proceed, Adrian." The Duke looked to Mr. Hargreaves. The solicitor rose. "For order, Your Grace, I suggest the note be placed first, then the copybook, then the household key record." "No," the Duke said. "Miss Lydgate will speak first." A stir moved through the room. Lady Marwood looked surprised. Lady Selina looked offended by surprise itself. Lady Honoria became very still. Beatrice felt the old pressure of class and gender gather around her. Rooms like this were not built for a governess to begin. They were built for her to answer after others had described her. The Duke had given her something more dangerous than defense. He had given her the first word. Beatrice stepped to the table. "The note found in my trunk was not written by me. It was placed beneath my father's book after I had been sent to the dower cottage. Last night, His Grace, Mr. Hargreaves, Mistress Alder, and I returned to the schoolroom wing. My old copybook was missing from its proper drawer and found inside Mrs. Pike's locked supply chest." Mrs. Pike made a sharp sound. "Those stores are under my charge. Miss Lydgate had no right to pry." "The copybook contained my hand," Beatrice said, without turning. "Beside, it was a page of attempts to imitate that hand." The same phrase was practiced several times. Mr. Hargreaves opened the folio and laid the copied sheet beside the forged note. The similarity was visible even from several feet away. The differences were visible too, once one knew to look. The false hand leaned too anxiously. The loops tried too hard to be modest. The letter B bent like a person wearing another woman's gown. Lady Selina said softly, "But a clever person might practice making a forgery look forged." Beatrice turned to her. "A clever person might also mention a blue key before the county knew it existed." Lady Selina's face flashed pink. "I told you I don't remember precisely what I said." "I do," the Duke said. "So does Mr. Hargreaves." Lady Honoria folded her hands. "This is becoming personal. We are here to protect the children, not punish careless phrasing. Then we shall discuss protection." Beatrice picked up the nursery key ring. The brass acorn lay cool against her palm. "When I returned these keys, the key to the Blue Nursery was missing. The household register page naming it had been cut out. Master Percy stated that the Blue Nursery opens that way when Mrs. Pike brings the blue key." Mrs. Pike's face tightened. "A child's fancy." The Duke turned to the key press. "Open it." Mrs. Pike did not move. "Your Grace, all keys in that press are accounted for by household department. Then opening it should comfort you." Her hands shook when she drew a key from her chatelaine and unlocked the press. Rows of labelled hooks hung inside: pantry, china closet, east linen room, old nursery stores. The Duke stepped forward. "Mr. Hargreaves." The solicitor examined each hook, then paused at the back where a strip of dark cloth had been pinned over a lower nail. He removed the cloth. Behind it hung a small blue-handled key, its head wrapped with thread to muffle sound. The room emptied of breath. Beatrice felt the silence enter her body and steady it. There it was. Not a rumour. Not a child's confusion. Iron, blue paint, hidden under the housekeeper's authority. Lady Honoria rose. "I have never seen that key. It was too fast." The Duke looked at her. "No one asked whether you had." Mrs. Pike began to speak, stopped, then tried again. "It was kept aside because the old lock is troublesome." "I meant no harm." "Then why was the register page removed?" Mr. Hargreaves asked. "I don't know." "Why was wax matching Lady Honoria's seal found in the lock?" the Duke asked. Lady Honoria's eyes flashed. "Do not imply what you dare not prove." Beatrice set down the nursery keys. The sound was small, but the room flinched because everyone remembered the first time she had done it. My lady, proof has been arriving for 3 days. It has simply been made to climb past rank before anyone would greet it. The Reverend Wycliffe murmured, Miss Lydgate. Not a warning, almost sorrow. Lady Honoria's face hardened. You see? This is exactly the tone I feared. Insolence disguised as injured virtue. Adrian, are you so blind to flattery that you would let a governess turn your house against your own blood? Lady Honoria, the Duke said. You are not my blood. You are a relation by marriage who was trusted with courtesy and repaid it with command. The blow was perfectly delivered because it was fact. Lady Honoria went white. Lady Selina stared at the carpet. For the first time, Beatrice saw the shape beneath the performance. Lady Honoria had ruled because the Duke had been absent, because the children were young, because servants feared losing character, because governesses could be replaced, because polite society preferred a cruel lady to an inconvenient employee. The structure had protected her. Now the structure was turning. A small sound came from the doorway. Everyone looked. Lady Imogen stood there in her grey frock, one hand gripping the doorframe. Percy was behind her, half hidden and frightened. In Imogen's other hand hung a pale ribbon, torn and faintly marked with blue. Beatrice moved before she thought, then stopped herself so the child would not be overwhelmed. The Duke's voice changed at once. Imogen, you needn't come in. The little girl looked at Lady Honoria, then at Beatrice, then at the blue key hanging exposed in the open press. Her chin trembled, but she did not retreat. I can tell you who shut me in, she whispered. The room did not move. It seemed impossible that one child's whisper could halt a duke, a solicitor, a vicar, 2 ladies of rank, and every servant but the wall. Yet Lady Imogen Vale stood in the doorway with her torn ribbon in her hand, and all the authority in Harrow-mere Park waited upon her next breath. Beatrice felt the old instinct seize her. Go to the child, shield her, remove her before the adults made her courage into a spectacle. She stepped forward only once, then stopped because Imogen was not looking helpless now. Frightened, yes. Pale, yes. But not helpless. The child had walked into the room carrying truth as though it were heavier than her own small body, and Beatrice would not take that from her by rushing too quickly. The Duke crossed the carpet instead, but he stopped several paces away and crouched so his eyes were not above hers. The movement unsettled the room more than a command would have done. Dukes did not kneel before children in drawing rooms while county ladies watched. This one did. You may speak only if you wish, he said. No one here will force you. Lady Honoria gave a strained laugh. Adrian, don't make a performance of this. The child is overwrought. Imogen's fingers closed tighter around the ribbon. She says that when she wants me to stop. The words were small. They were also fatal. Lady Honoria's face changed so quickly that only those watching for truth could have seen it. Beatrice saw. So did the Duke. Reverend Wycliffe lowered his gaze as if shame had touched him personally. Who says it? The Duke asked. Imogen swallowed. Her eyes found Beatrice. Beatrice nodded once. Not speak. Not obey. Only I am here. Lady Honoria, Imogen whispered. She said I mustn't tell stories, but I wasn't telling stories. I saw Mrs. Pike put papers behind the blue room screen. I followed because I thought they were Miss Lydgate's lesson papers. Mrs. Pike made a sound, half protest and half breath. Mr. Hargreaves wrote nothing yet. His pen waited. Which day was this? The Duke asked. The day before I was shut in. Imogen looked down at the ribbon. I had this in my hair. It caught on the old bed when I tried to get out from behind the screen. Lady Honoria came in. She asked what I had seen. Lady Honoria rose. This is monstrous. You cannot allow a child to accuse me because she misunderstood a household errand. Sit down, the Duke said. She did not. For one suspended moment, the room saw the contest plainly. Not governess against lady, not child against elder, authority against authority. Then Adrian Westcombe stood, and Lady Honoria sat. Beatrice's breath released without sound. Imogen's courage trembled but did not collapse. She told Mrs. Pike to take me out by the back passage. Imogen continued. Then later, when Miss Lydgate was in the schoolroom, Lady Honoria said, "I must learn what happens to children who pry." She took me to the Blue Nursery. Mrs. Pike had the key. Percy stepped from behind the door frame, his face blotched from silent crying. I heard Mrs. Pike say Miss Lydgate would be blamed if Imogen made noise. Beatrice's heart tightened. Percy had carried that sentence alone, as if the words themselves had weight enough to bend a child. She said softly, "You have done very well." Lady Honoria turned on her. "Do not coach them in front of us." The Duke's voice cut in before Beatrice had to answer. Miss Lydgate praised courage. "You should learn the difference." Lady Selina's eyes widened, and for the first time since her arrival at Harrow-mere Park, she seemed to understand that the tide had turned beyond polite recovery. The Duke looked back to Imogen. "Did Miss Lydgate lock you in?" Imogen shook her head so hard the loose strands of hair moved against her cheeks. "No," she knocked. She kept knocking. I heard her say my name. I tried to pull the ribbon free because it caught on a splinter inside the door. Then Mrs. Pike said Miss Lydgate was making me worse. Beatrice felt every eye in the room swing toward the pale ribbon. She moved then, because no child should have to stand while adults studied the remnants of her terror. "Your Grace," she said, "may I?" He understood at once and stepped aside. Beatrice went to Imogen, knelt, and took the ribbon only after the child placed it in her palm. The fabric was torn near one end, with a ragged line of threads and a faint blue smear. "You do not need to say more unless you wish it." Imogen leaned into her before she could stop herself. Beatrice curved one arm around the child's shoulders, not dramatically, not possessively, but enough that Imogen knew she was not alone. Lady Honoria's voice shook now, though whether from fear or anger, no one could have said. "You see how she does it? She makes herself indispensable, then turns children against their own blood." Beatrice lifted her head. "Their own blood left them frightened of a hallway. You insolent woman." "Yes," Beatrice said quietly. "That is what truth is often called when it comes from the wrong chair." A startled silence followed. Mr. Hargreaves's pen moved at last, scratching across the page. The Duke took the ribbon from Beatrice and carried it to the household key press, where the blue key still hung exposed. "Mr. Hargreaves, the splinter on the Blue Nursery door. I noted it. Yesterday, Your Grace. Bring the small shaving from the paper packet." The solicitor opened his folio and produced the sliver of painted wood taken from the inner edge of the Blue Nursery door. Under the morning light, the torn ribbon fibers clung to it exactly. Pale threads caught in old blue paint. Reverend Wycliffe exhaled softly. Lady Marwood pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. Proof did not shout, it fit. That was its power. The key, the wax, the forged handwriting, the copied account, the ribbon, the child's memory. Each small thing found its place, and the story Lady Honoria had built began to lose its walls. Mrs. Pike looked toward Lady Honoria then, a single desperate glance from servant to mistress. The Duke saw it, Beatrice saw it. Lady Honoria did too, and her face hardened with warning. "Mrs. Pike," Adrian said, "you will remain in the housekeeper's sitting room until Mr. Hargreaves records your statement in full." Mrs. Pike's chin lifted. "Am I a prisoner, Your Grace? You are a servant in my household who will not leave with a character, while grave questions remain." The sentence struck harder than any shout. A servant dismissed without character had little road left in England. Beatrice knew that terror intimately, and though Mrs. Pike had helped aim it at her, she did not rejoice. Justice was not hunger, it was steadiness. The children will be removed from Lady Honoria's care at once, the Duke continued. Mrs. Alder will stay with them. Mistress Lorne will remain only if Miss Lydgate judges her fit to do so. Beatrice looked up sharply. He had placed judgment in her hands before them all, not affection, not charity, authority. Lady Honoria stood again, her composure now cracked at the edges. You cannot give a governess power over Westcombe blood. I can give a trustworthy woman authority over children when those of higher rank have abused it. The room seemed to absorb the words slowly. Beatrice felt them settle, not as rescue but as recognition. For once, the social order had not been overturned by sentiment. It had been corrected by truth. Imogen's hand found hers. Percy moved to her other side. Beatrice held them both only until their breathing steadied, then gently released them, because they had to learn that safety did not always mean clinging. Mrs. Alder, she said, and her voice did not shake. Will you take them to the morning room? Warm milk for Master Percy. No lavender in the linen. Lady Imogen should have the blue ribbon put away, only if she asks. The older maid curtsied as if Beatrice had always possessed the right to command. Yes, miss. Imogen looked frightened at leaving. Beatrice bent close. You are not being sent away, you are being protected. There is a difference. The child nodded, and this time she walked out without flinching at Lady Honoria. That, more than anything, seemed to wound the older woman. When the door closed behind the children, the drawing-room felt stripped of softness. Only adults remained, and with them all the consequences adults create. The Duke turned to the gathered witnesses. This afternoon, the household will assemble here. Senior servants Mr. Hargreaves, Reverend Wycliffe, and those family members present will hear the matter concluded. No rumour will outrun the truth again. Lady Honoria's lips parted. For the first time, she had no graceful answer ready. Beatrice looked at the nursery keys on the table, at the small brass acorn resting beside the blue key that had nearly destroyed her name. Then she looked at Adrian Westcombe. He did not speak to her. He did not need to. In the silence between them, a new understanding formed. He would use his power to open the room. She would use her voice to tell what had been locked inside. By afternoon, the drawing-room no longer pretended to be a place for tea. The roses remained in their vases, the silver urns still stood upon the sideboard, and pale winter light still rested upon the carpet. But every gentle surface had become a witness. Senior sons lined the wall by rank, from the butler, with his white head, bowed to the youngest nursery maid, who could not stop twisting her apron. Reverend Wycliffe stood near the hearth, grave and silent. Mr. Hargreaves sat at the long table with his folio open and fresh ink ready. Lady Marwood, Lady Selina Armitage, and the two Westcombe cousins occupied chairs, arranged not for comfort, but for consequence. Lady Honoria Vane stood near the fire in black silk, no longer seated as mistress, not yet named as culprit, held in that narrow space where pride knows the floor may vanish beneath it. Beatrice entered last, not because she had been commanded to wait, but because she had gone first to the morning room to see Lady Imogen and Master Percy. Imogen had been wrapped in a clean shawl without lavender. Percy had slept at last, his hand curled where the toy soldier should have been. Beatrice left them with Mistress Alder only after the child whispered, "Will you come back?" And Beatrice answered, "Yes, if truth lets me." When she stepped into the drawing-room, every eye turned. This time she did not feel stripped by it. She felt seen, and the difference steadied her more than courage ever had. The Duke stood at the head of the table. Before him lay the nursery key ring, with the brass acorn tag, the blue key, the copied register page edge, the forged note, her recovered copybook, the practice sheet, Percy's toy soldier, Imogen's torn ribbon, the sliver of painted wood, the blue wax, and the duplicate account found in Mrs. Pike's drawer. Nothing dramatic in itself. Small things, household things, a child's things, a woman's handwriting. A locked room's leftovers. Together, they had become impossible to dismiss. Adrian Westcombe looked over the room once. This matter began with an accusation against Miss Lydgate. It will end with the truth recorded before those who heard that accusation repeated it or allowed it to stand. Lady Honoria lifted her chin. You speak as if judgment has already been passed. No, the Duke said. I speak as a man who delayed judgment too long. The admission moved through the room more powerfully than blame. Beatrice felt it settle near her heart, but she did not look down. The Duke turned to her. Miss Lydgate, you will tell the sequence as you understand it. No one will interrupt. Lady Honoria gave a faint laugh. A governess will instruct us now. Beatrice looked at her, then at the table. No, my lady. I will return what was placed upon me. Silence answered. Beatrice placed one hand near the key ring, but did not touch it yet. The key I returned did not include the key to the Blue Nursery. The register page naming that key had been cut away. The door bore scratches on the outside of the latch, and wax was found in the lock groove. Lady Imogen said, I knocked from outside. Master Percy, said Mrs. Pike, brought the blue key. Last night, my copybook and practice attempts at my hand were found in Mrs. Pike's locked drawer. The forged note in my trunk was copied from that hand. Mr. Hargreaves held up the practice sheet beside the note. Murmurs rose and died. Beatrice continued before fear could be dressed again as doubt. The duplicate account shows funds marked for the nursery that did not reach the children. Coal, blankets, primers. Repairs to a room that was kept locked. Michaelmas would have exposed the accounts. I had to be removed before then, and not merely removed. Discredited. Mrs. Pike made a thin sound. Lady Honoria turned on her with one glance, and in that glance, the housekeeper's remaining loyalty visibly cracked. The Duke saw it. Mrs. Pike, he said, you may speak now and be recorded, or remain silent, and be dismissed without character with this evidence unanswered. Mrs. Pike's face seemed to fold inward. I never meant the child harm. Lady Honoria went white. Be silent. The Duke's voice cut in. You will not command in this room. Mrs. Pike clasped her hands together. Her ladyship, said Lady Imogen, had seen papers she should not. She said Miss Lydgate was becoming too bold, that the children minded her more than their own kin, that His Grace would believe a troublesome governess sooner gone than heard. I took the key from the press. I held it. I did not put the child in. I only stood by the passage. Beatrice closed her eyes for one breath, stood by. How much cruelty in England had survived because someone only stood by? Who locked the door? The Duke asked. Mrs. Pike looked at Lady Honoria. Tears shone but did not fall. Lady Honoria did, Your Grace. The room held the confession as if no one knew what to do with something so plain. Lady Honoria's face hardened into a last, elegant mask. A servant will say anything to save her place. Your place is no longer hers to save, Adrian said. Mr. Hargreaves laid the duplicate account before him. The sums transferred under Blue Nursery repairs correspond with household withdrawals authorized by Lady Honoria's hand. Lady Honoria's composure finally broke, not into regret, but fury. I preserved this house while you abandoned it to dust and children's tears. I maintained dignity. I kept servants obedient. I kept scandal from your door. You locked it inside my nursery. His answer was quiet. That quiet ended her better than shouting could have done. Lady Honoria looked toward Lady Selina, but the young woman had gone rigid with the instinct of social survival. No alliance would be offered there. London will hear of this, Lady Honoria said. They will hear that you let a paid governess rule you against your own family. Let them hear that I dismissed cruelty before it could call itself family again. The Duke turned to Mr. Hargreaves. Lady Honoria Vane is removed from all authority within Harrow-mere Park as of this hour. Her allowance through this household is suspended pending restitution. She will leave for her brother's house tomorrow under proper escort. Mrs. Pike is dismissed without character. Her statement will be kept with the household record. Any servant who knowingly carried false tales against Miss Lydgate may come forward before sunset and be judged with mercy. After sunset, there will be none. A shiver passed along the servants' wall. Beatrice did not rejoice. She looked at Mrs. Pike and saw a woman ruined by obedience to the wrong mistress. She looked at Lady Honoria and saw no ruin yet, only rage at being named. Justice did not feel like triumph. It felt like a door opening in a long-closed room, letting in cold air first. The Duke lifted the nursery keys. For a moment, Beatrice remembered the sound of them on the silver tray, the hall watching her trunk by the door, the word without character falling like a sentence. Adrian placed the ring before her, the blue key now restored among the others. The brass acorn turned toward her palm. "Miss Lydgate," he said, and his voice changed enough that the room heard the respect in it. "Before this household and these witnesses, I state that you were falsely accused. You protected Lady Imogen and Master Percy when those entrusted with rank failed them. If you are willing, I ask you to accept restored authority in the nursery until you choose otherwise. Until you choose otherwise." The phrase touched every place in her that had been commanded, dismissed, arranged, and nearly hidden for her own good. Beatrice looked at the keys. She wanted to take them for Imogen, for Percy, for the small room where fear had been taught obedience. She wanted to take them because truth had finally made them clean. But another truth stood beside it. Keys given without freedom could become another lock. She raised her eyes to the Duke. "Your Grace, I cannot accept them if they are only duty," returned after disgrace. His face stilled. "What would make them acceptable?" The room leaned toward her, every witness waiting. Beatrice heard her own heart. Steady now. I must be free to refuse them, free to leave with my name restored, free to stay without gratitude being mistaken for obligation, free to serve the children. It's because I choose their good, not because scandal left me nowhere else to go. Something softened in Adrian's eyes, not weakness, not sentiment, but understanding hard-earned. "Then you are free." Lady Honoria made a sound of disbelief. No one looked at her. The Duke pushed the keys no farther. He left them between himself and Beatrice, where choice could breathe. "No position, no wage, no shelter in this house will be used to bind you. Mr. Hargreaves will prepare a written restoration of character before evening. It will bear my hand, Reverend Wycliffe's, and every witness here willing to sign truth now that it costs them pride." Lady Marwood lowered her head first. "I will sign," Reverend Wycliffe followed. One by one, others murmured agreement, some from conviction, some from shame, but all before the room. Beatrice looked down at the brass acorn again. It no longer looked like proof of service. It looked like a question. Behind the drawing-room door, a child's small voice called her name. Not loudly, not fearfully, but with trust returning to its own strength. Beatrice placed her fingers beside the keys, not yet around them. "Then, Your Grace," she said, "I will decide after I have seen the children." 3 weeks later, the Blue Nursery door stood open every morning, and no one in Harrow-mere Park walked past it quickly anymore. At first, the servants avoided looking in, as if the room still held the shape of what had happened there. Then Mistress Alder placed fresh curtains at the windows. Mistress Lorne brought in a basket of mended dolls and wooden animals. Percy carried his crooked toy soldier to the mantel and announced, that soldiers who had survived dreadful corridors deserved promotion. Imogen stood on the threshold for a long while with Beatrice beside her, one small hand resting in the governess's palm, and then she stepped inside. No trumpet sounded. No grand speech marked it. The child crossed the faded rug, touched the old rocking horse, and said, "It doesn't look as large in daylight." Beatrice had nearly wept then, not because all was healed, but because fear had lost 1 inch of ground. Healing in a house did not arrive like a carriage at the front door. It came in quiet revisions. The nursery fire was laid properly now. Coal appeared without pleading. New primers arrived from York, wrapped in brown paper. Percy's ink no longer thickened from cold. Imogen slept through 3 nights in succession, then 4. Lady Honoria had left under escort to her brother's house in Lincolnshire, her departure conducted with all the dignity that rank could lend to disgrace. Mrs. Pike was dismissed without character, and the staff spoke of her rarely, with the uneasy restraint of people who had learned that obedience could become guilt if it never asked why. Mr. Hargreaves prepared the written restoration of Beatrice's character before sunset on the day of the drawing-room judgment. The Duke signed first. Reverend Wycliffe signed. Lady Marwood signed with visible shame, and later called upon Beatrice during the proper Sunday hour, not with triumph or excessive apology, but with a stiff, honest sentence that did more good than tears. Miss Lydgate, I believed too quickly what was easiest to believe. Beatrice had answered, "Most people do, my lady, until truth becomes inconvenient." Lady Marwood had accepted the rebuke. That too was a kind of justice. Yet Beatrice did not take the nursery keys that day, nor the next. They remained on the Duke's library table beside the brass acorn tag, restored, cleaned, and waiting. The children asked after them often. Percy wanted to know whether keys became sad when no one used them. Imogen asked whether a person could be afraid of a room and still love the people inside it. Beatrice answered both questions as best she could, but she gave the Duke no answer about herself. He did not press. That was the first reason she began to trust him. The second was that he arranged, through Mr. Hargreaves, an independent settlement in her name before he spoke one word about staying. It was not charity disguised as benevolence. It was written cleanly, witnessed properly, and explained without flourish. If Beatrice chose to leave Harrow-mere Park, she would have enough to seek a respectable position, live with modest comfort, or refuse any house that required silence in exchange for bread. When the Duke told her, he did so in the winter garden, with the door left open to the passage, and Mistress Alder within sight beyond the glass, sorting linen with the discretion of an angel pretending to be busy. Frost silvered the panes. Outside, the Yorkshire fields lay pale beneath a hard blue sky. "You should have been free before I asked anything of you," Adrian said. Beatrice looked at the papers in her hand. The seal was his, but the freedom was hers. Most people give a woman security and call it obligation. I know. His voice was quiet. I have seen too much obligation mistaken for loyalty in my house. She glanced at him then. In the weeks since Lady Honoria's removal, he had changed less outwardly than others imagined. He remained controlled, spare with words, and formidable enough that footmen straightened before they knew he had entered. But the coldness had altered. It no longer seemed like disregard. It seemed like a discipline he was learning not to use against tenderness. "The children are better," Beatrice said. "They are better because you stayed. They are better because they were believed." He accepted that with a small inclination of his head. "And because you taught me how late belief becomes another kind of failure." The honesty of it moved through her softly. She looked away toward the glass roof. where winter light rested in pale squares upon the tiled floor. You could have chosen the easier story. I did at first. No, she said. You chose the cleaner corridor and the dower cottage. That was not the same as believing the lie. His mouth tightened. It was close enough to wound you. Beatrice did not deny it. Forgiveness that hurried past the wound was only another form of politeness. Yes. He took the answer as he had taken every difficult truth from her since the night of the forged note. Without defense, without punishment. Then I am sorry for that, and I will remain sorry after you have forgiven me if you ever do. She looked back at him. You ask very little for a duke. I am about to ask a great deal for a man. The air changed, not dramatically. No music rose, no servant gasped. Yet the quiet inside Beatrice seemed to gather itself. Adrian reached into his coat and drew out the nursery key ring. He did not offer it at once. He held it in his palm, the brass acorn warmed by his skin. I brought these because they were the first thing I saw of you, he said. Not your face. Not your poverty, not your position. I saw a woman surrender authority rather than let it become a lie. I have governed estates for years, and understood less of honor than you showed me with one ring of keys. Beatrice's throat tightened. Your Grace, Adrian, if you can bear it. The softness of the request nearly undid her. In speech, at least, she allowed it. Adrian. His eyes changed when she said it, not with triumph. I would ask you to remain at Harrow-mere Park as long as you wish, in whatever role you choose. If that is governess for a time, I will honor it. If it is guest, I will defend it. If it is nothing at all, and you leave tomorrow, the settlement remains yours. He paused. The keys lay between them, not yet given. But if one day you can imagine this house, not as the place that nearly destroyed your name, but as a place we might make honest together, then I would ask you to become my wife. Beatrice did not answer at once. A lesser man might have mistaken silence for refusal or tried to fill it with persuasion. Adrian did neither. Beyond the glass, she could see Imogen and Percy in the garden with Mistress Alder, bundled in coats, arguing solemnly over whether the toy soldier needed a snow fort, though there was no snow. The sight steadied her. Love, she thought, did not erase what had happened. It gave one courage to build where harm had been named and removed. I will not be rescued into marriage, she said. No. I will not be made grateful into obedience. Never. And I will not stop telling you when a door has been locked, simply because others prefer it closed. His expression softened then, and for the first time, Beatrice saw the man beneath the title without having to search through grief to find him. That is the woman I am asking. She looked at the keys. Then at the papers that proved she could go, then at the children beyond the glass. Finally, she placed her hand over the brass acorn. Then I will stay. Not because I must. His hand closed gently around hers, careful and reverent. Because you wish it. Because I wish it. The Sunday calls that followed made the matter public in the proper way. Reverend Wycliffe spoke plainly in the drawing-room that Miss Lydgate had been wronged and restored. Lady Marwood returned with 2 county ladies who had whispered too readily and now offered stiff curtsies weighted with apology. Beatrice accepted neither grovelling nor flattery. She accepted truth. The Duke stood beside her throughout, not before her. That was what people remembered. Not a ballroom, not applause. A drawing-room where a woman once treated as disposable was addressed with respect, and a duke made society follow his lead by giving her room to answer for herself. When the last callers left, Imogen and Percy burst in from the nursery passage, unable to bear decorum one moment longer. Percy looked at the key ring in Beatrice's hand. Are you keeping them forever now? Beatrice looked to Adrian. He answered the child, but his eyes stayed on her. Only if she wishes. Imogen smiled then, fully and without fear. That evening, Beatrice walked to the Blue Nursery alone. The fire was bright. The rocking horse had been mended. Percy's soldier stood proudly on the mantel. She hung the ring of nursery keys on the hook beside the open door. The brass acorn caught the lamplight. This time, the sound it made was not a verdict. It was a promise. The door remained open. The house at last did too.